Hello, hello. Okie dokie. So to preface everything, it's going to be a fairly short stream because as you can see, I'm pretty close to finishing. Not to mention, I also have to prepare because I'm going out of town. So it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to spend a lot of time doing this and then have no time to do all that. But luckily, it kind of all worked out. Had I not had to do the other stuff the other day, because I'm going to be gone tomorrow, so today is the best day to do it at least. Okie dokie. Oh yeah. Wait, let's use this. Forgot that I was doing that. Let's see. Got four. Make sure I can be seen pretty well. How's it focused? It's not focused very well. Hold on. No. Ugh. There we go. That should look better. I think. Okay. That's a little weird because, I mean, I could be doing it with my front camera, I guess. That'd probably make it easier, to be honest. I don't know, maybe one of these days I'll get a super nice, mega cool camera. It's just, at the moment, it's not a great. Yeah, part of the problem is actually finding a decent camera because a lot of the cameras you're gonna use for like good streaming, video recording, and all that is gonna be very expensive. I mean, relatively expensive at least. Of course, it'd be better if cell phones, if they didn't limit cell phones so often. Like I get what they do. They do it because of they don't want someone to be able to just hook a USB to it and then crack the phone to steal people's data or whatever the case may be. That being said, it's not really that hard to steal someone's data off a cell phone. And especially if you're someone like a cop or something like that, if you're the police, yeah, a lot of times they'll just give it to you. Although I think Apple actually did an okay job at doing that. Last time I heard that they tried to be like, hey, could you open this phone up? Apple was like, no way, Jose. And I'm like, wow, Apple actually having integrity for its customers, amazing. Although then again, there's probably not so much integrity for the customers as it is, you know, uh, optics. That's what they call it now is optics. They want to make sure that their brand perception is that the phones are safe. And so you see, I also decided to spruce up my logo on the top right instead of just being a white thing. I said, oh, what I'll do is I'll just turn it, get a little animated image there. It's not super smooth or anything, but hey, it's a start at least. So if you guys like that change, let me know. I tell you, I just can't wait till I'm done stitching on black fabric. So that's part of why I got started kind of early. Probably not, it's not as early as the other day, but still. All right, let's see something. Let me test this, make sure this works. Oh, yeah, it works. Look at it go. So yeah, I've been mostly having to deal with work stuff and preparing for this trip instead of video ideas and things like that. Because I've got, again, I always have a backlog anyway, but but still, I'm at least taking care of some of these ideas. But I've got a lot of other things I've got to organize and sort of go through. Particularly a lot of files and stuff. Because I've got about like, I got a whole bunch of different places where my production stuff is. So what I'm trying to do is organize all of that in addition to other files, like games and stuff like that. Because unfortunately during this trip I pretty much can't work on any videos because I would have to have a laptop with me. And I have a Chromebook that I use for work on occasion, but to understand how little I use it, I maybe use it once a month. So it's not like, you know, I mean, I only really use it just in case I need it. And it's like the cheapest possible Chromebook you could get. It's like a Lenovo, but it's super cheap. So it doesn't have the power to do anything really. In fact, for this trip, in case I wanted to do anything with like anything with video games, I was actually thinking of buying or doing a like a rent to own thing with a laptop and then returning it just so that I could have a decent laptop to use rather than buying one. Now Rhodes has a gaming laptop that's not too bad. So I guess I could always bring that. It's just it's a little beat, so I don't know. I don't know. What does that say? No. Thank you, good buddy. We are not dealing with that today. God, they're really bad, aren't they? But there we go. See ya. I've noticed how bad they've been lately. Like almost every stream, there's at least one. Oh yeah, luckily it's gonna be a pretty good trip, so especially because I don't have to think about work. Haha. So I tell you, I've been reading continue I've been continuing on the Dune books again. Because again, I wanted to read through the 6 Herbert books. And let me tell you something. Heretics of Dune is really weird. Like 99% of the story is about sex, and it's really weird. Wait, you can't say that on YouTube. It's about Shreks. That's what it is. Wait, I'm not monetized, so I can say it all I want. Fuck you, YouTube. Stick that in your pipe and smoke it. No, it's it's really weird, you know? They talk like way too much about it because like there's this thing with the honored maters and the Bene Gesserit and all this kind of stuff, and it just and every time the Bene Gesserit are talking about the honored maters, they call them whores like every single time. Like, and if someone even mentions honored maters, they're like whores. It's like uh, I start to think of Danny DeVito, right? It's hilarious. Like whores. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, in particular, I don't find it all that interesting having the story focus on the Bene Gesserit and stuff like that. I found characters like, the Atreides and Leto II to be much more interesting. Especially when you have one that like just waxes philosophically for an extremely long time, and it's like, okie dokie, let's dial it back a bit, shall we? Of course, I'm going to keep reading through Chapter House Dune, but I don't know. If this is the pattern, I don't know how much I'll like it. Because I like Dune. Dune and Dune Messiah and Children of Dune are all good. I had trouble getting through God Emperor of Dune, but I ultimately got through it, and it wasn't bad. It's just, I feel like both it and Heretics had the same problem where it's like there's this extremely long wind up to a finale. Like it's like I mean I know that's that's kind of the basic of a story, but it feels like not much happens until you get to that finale. You know, like I know it's the journey and not the destination, but you know, the journey is kind of tedious. Mm. It's like it's especially weird because their plan is like nebulous, so you're not even really sure what is happening. You're like they're doing this thing, but you're not really clear on what exactly they're trying to do. I don't know. It wasn't super fun. I'm thinking about going back and reading the X-Wing series because that's a good series. Like the entire X-Wing book series is great. All the way from the first one to Mercy Kill, they're so good. I would recommend if anyone likes Star Wars EU novels, they're the ones I would recommend. Like a series of them. I know the Zahn trilogy and the duology. Uh, everyone praises them as being good, and they are. They're great. Don't get me wrong. Um, but I think the X-Wing series is probably the best EU series. Sorry, Zahn fans, it's true. It's much more intricate. It's much more well written. Zahn's a great writer now. Don't get me wrong. But then you have things like I guess he realized that the Jedi's are kind of overpowered in their universe. That without like Sith lords to oppose them, they're pretty much the strongest beings in the galaxy. So, dudes with blasters and stuff like that can't oppose dudes who can block blaster bolts and then, you know, uh, force choke you and all that. Which is true. I mean, obviously, there's definitely a power differential there. But then his solution was to have the Isalamiris, or however it's pronounced. Those lizards that can basically radiate a field of anti-force. So then, like, you see this a lot in the Hand of Thawne duology, where you literally have um his troops or whatever who are literally wearing backpacks with those Isalamiris on it. And it's like, what? I think it's also in the trilogy too, but it's more pronounced there because it's like you have Luke and Mara Jade are like in this place, and then they're, you know, having to fight against these troops who have these things on there, who have like these lizard backpacks is the best way to call them, and so they can't, you know, um, they can't properly use the force. What the hell? God, Jesus, it's my brain shut down now. That's a little goofy, admittedly, but it does have some interesting stuff. Um, like these creatures that he encounters on one of the planets that he has these conversations with. It's pretty interesting. Don't get me wrong. I just wish the Aftermath trilogy was better. Like for it to now be like the canon trilogy after Return. I feel like it really dropped the ball because they turned the timetable up to 6 months, whereas in the original EU, the Empire took about 15 years before it officially gave up and became just another player in the galactic whatever. But here they're like, oh no, it's just completely destroyed after 6 months. And I'm like, really? I know about all that. I mean, I guess because they decided to give him his like, give Palpatine his like scorched earth thing, which does sound like Palpatine. Then again, the old EU does also do this thing where he's like, well, actually, planning, I was planning to prepare the galaxy for the invasion of the Yuzon Vong, stuff like that. So I guess it's six of one, half a dozen of another, right? I think the big problem, though, honestly, is how Disney is how Disney wants to make the entirety of the EU is, well, not the entirety. The current EU is 100% canon. And I think that's a problem because now that means anything anybody ever writes is considered canon, right? Every game, every book, which would include children's books, every show, everything. To me, that's kind of a problem because it limits you in what you can do. Not to mention, it's going to create continuity errors. Like that's part of why I think they've titled the novelizations of the movies as was I think they call them the extended or expanded version, something like that. Because they realize, oopsie daisy, if we say everything is canon and the book has a dialogue that's different from the movie, then that's going to create a continuity error. So if we just say that's an expanded version of it rather than a novelization, that's what I think their logic is. And I'm like, see, that's why you don't do that. You give it freedom because then all you have to do to sort of decanonize any novel or any aspect of the story entirely, all you have to do is say, "Oh, it's not canon." It's that easy. I mean, you could do it now, but because that's one thing. Um, the old EU, George Lucas basically treated it like this. He's like, there are certain rules that they did have to follow, but in general, it was semi-canon. Essentially, it was basically canon until it was not. So if he made another movie that contradicted one of these books, then the movie takes precedent. But if there's nothing in the movie that contradicts the books, then you can he's like whatever, it's as canon as it can be. And I think that's a good way to do it because it gives people the freedom to tell the stories that they want to tell, you know, without having to worry about canon or, you know, contradiction, continuity errors, all that kind of stuff. Because, yeah, I can't imagine how difficult it is because, like, imagine trying to write a story about your life. You're going to find that it'd be really difficult to fit a bunch of important events, into a book about, I don't know, a short period in your life. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it turns out Luke Skywalker was involved in 17 different uh world-changing battles in a period of 3 years. Might get a little crowded in this calendar, you know what I'm saying? And don't get me wrong, there's some new EU stuff that's fucking amazing. But I think there's a lot of like Rogue One I love. I think Death Star is an okay. Well, actually, I wouldn't even say it's okay. It's actually pretty good. Which essential Death Star is essentially Rogue One before Rogue One existed, because it's about them stealing the. Not. No, wait, hold on. Scratch that. Yeah, it's about them getting the plans to the Death Star and the lead up to A New Hope. So it basically kind of does that, right? It's pretty good, but I think I like Rogue One because it's one of my favorite Star Wars movies, which some people hate it and I absolutely love it. And there's quite a few good books like Rebel Rising, which deals with concepts like terrorism and things like that. Because there's a conflict between it's really good at setting up the story of Jen Erso, and like part of why she's sort of separated from Saw Gerrera, who basically raised her. You know, because the difference is while she was against the Empire, she wasn't against the Empire to the point of wanting to commit terrorism, killing people who were not like Imperials, people who were like, he basically committed terrorist actions, right? Like wealthy elites who might have been allied with or whatever with the Imperials. Oh, he's perfectly fine with just blowing them the hell up. But she's like, well, that's not cool, bruh. What is this thing doing? See? Come on. There we go. And things like that. It's pretty good. I would recommend Rebel Rising. Rebel Rising as a prerequisite to Rogue One. It's pretty good. Um, you know, I think I would have liked it if they actually canonized some of the EU books though, because ones like Shadows of the Empire is very good. So like, yeah, canonize that. I can understand they didn't necessarily want to canonize the Dawn trilogy. Dawn. Blah, blah, blah. I can understand there's some books they didn't want to canonize. Like, what is that one? The Courtship of Princess Leia. Which one was the one written by that idiot who wrote an idiot book? I'm super mad about it. That's why I'm being insulting and angry about it. Courtship. Wow, spelled that wrong. Is that the one with Dathomir? Yeah. 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 Written by Dave Wolverton? Wolverton? Yeah, that book sucks ass. Oh, was it Angry Video Game Nerd? You see, ass. That book sucks. The writing isn't necessarily horrible, but oh my god, the characters are written so badly. It did introduce Dathomir and the Witches of Dathomir to us, which of course led us to us getting the Zabrak and all that stuff. But everything else about it is terrible because it has this weird gender dynamic about it that's super. Honestly, I would say read it just so you can get it and be like, what the hell? Because Han Solo straight up kidnaps Princess Leia. Like, no joke. He just straight up kidnaps her ass. And it's like, bro, they had belligerent sexual tension, not I'm a predator tension. It's not Han Solo waiting in a park wearing a trench coat for Leia. It was, the socio-political dynamics of people in different classes and things like that. The complex situation of human relationships versus this guy is a creep. And it's just weird. Like you read it and you're just like, what the hell is this? I will honestly say it's probably the worst EU book. And some of them are not that well written, and that one is so bad. Like, oh my God. Hell, there was a book. What book was it? There's a book by one of the authors that I really like the author, but I can't stand that book of his. Oh, it was what was that? See, now I can't remember. Can't remember anything because it's been so long. I've read like 80 EU books, so at this point it all starts to like mesh together. I'm dead serious when I said I've written like I've read a lot. It's was it Zahn? Let me see. I'm pretty sure it's one of his books because he's written a lot of books. Outbound Flight. That's the name. I do not like that book because I think it's really boring, actually. You get like a lot of scenes that are pretty much the same with like the dynamic. I'm trying to remember. Like, I got like a part way through the book, and then after like the 15th time that they said, or some sort of thing that repeated involving Luke and Mara, I can't remember what it was, but I was just like, oh my God, can they stop doing this? I felt like a fucking slog, you know? I was like, wow, I can't believe he wrote a book this terrible to me. But I guess, you know, you can't like everything by somebody. Again, he's not my favorite writer though. That's James Luceno. Is it Luceno? Luceno? I don't know. I don't know how it's pronounced. But he did Darth Plagueis, which is fantastic. And he each did a bunch of really good books. Splinter of the Mind's Eye is a super interesting read. If you read the novelization of A New Hope, you know, that's super interesting because it was written again. It was written as Star Wars came out. It was before Empire, before anything else. So it's a great view into it's a great in-depth view into his general into the general ideas of the story before he started retconning them. One of the things I tell people about Star Wars, why retcons aren't necessarily bad, is because Star Wars has always retconned story aspects, especially if they aren't very specifically defined. Um, Darth Vader was originally an enforcer of the Emperor in the same sense that Boba Fett was. If you look at Darth Vader and Boba Fett, they actually share a lot of similarities. They both always stay masked. You know, they're both like these, you know, mysterious, cool mercenaries. You know, they and superficially they have somewhat similar looks. You know, helmet, cape, you know, all the buttons and shit on their outfits. Well, you don't have that one. He didn't have that many buttons, but you know what? You kind of get what I'm saying. Hopefully, but they're both wearing like kind of like armor, you know, but they also have a lot of gadgetry. It's like superficially is what I'm saying that they're similar. If you look at it in that way, stitches look weird as hell. Uh, so I feel like that Boba Fett is basically took over as what Darth Vader would have been had they not decided to make him more important to the story. Because that's it. He was originally more or less a mercenary, but Darth Vader was super cool. The Force became super important because you can notice this dynamic in the original movie. Uh, Knowing this, you can see that when Tarkin tells Vader to actually commands Vader around, it's because in the original context was that he could order Vader around because, well, like for example, in the book, they basically say that the leader of the Empire is, they call him president as opposed to chancellor, right? And it's strongly implied that he's more or less a puppet, that the Empire is ran by the military. In this case, Grand Moff Tarkin is runs the Empire, right? Um, with Palpatine being a figurehead, you know. And so again, the case is he's got his little force guy with him. That's his mercenary, and of course he can command him around because he is the leader, right? Of course, all that's changed since then, but it is super interesting to look at it at the context that it was originally written. For example, um, Darth Vader was more or less a guy in a suit of armor as opposed to half man, half machine, right? Because he actually loses his hand in Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which again, if you read that, you can see how the context is different. There's a little bit of romantic implication between Leia and Luke because at the time they weren't written as siblings. But here's something also that I pointed out to other people. Keep in mind, Star Wars took a lot of inspiration from Dune. Going back to talking about Dune, and well, one of the things in Dune is that there is some implication, um, particularly with Ganima and Leto II. There's implication of like incestuous feelings, and they ultimately get married, but that's more or less it's more or less for the imperial stuff. What they call it, hegemony. I don't know how it's pronounced. Um, but again, the implication, as they say. Um, so when you think about it, making them siblings actually puts Star Wars back on track to being close to being similar to Dune. Because think about it. In this case, they're twins. They have their force connection somewhat similar to the prescience connection that Leto and Ganima have. Things like that. You know, it's pretty interesting. Splinter of the Mind's Eye isn't bad. I would definitely recommend reading the novelization of all the movies because some of them actually really help the movie. The novelization of Phantom Menace is better than the movie. And the reason why is because it does some stuff that the movie should have done. Like, first off, it essentially brushes over the Gungan war scene because, in my opinion, they focus way too much on that. Because, I mean, it's really only a diversion anyway. Why do we need to devote that much time to it? You have the, you have Anakin in the starship. You have the Jedi fighting Darth Maul, and then you have the raid on the Capitol on Theed. So it's like you're gonna add a fourth battle in there for us to focus on. I'm pretty sure that it was even about that movie. George Lucas had even said, "I think I went too far in some places." Yeah, yeah, Georgie boy, you kind of overextended yourself. Which you can actually see this when he made Attack the Clones. He does dial it back at the end to where it's not focusing on too many things at once. Now, granted, Attack the Clones has other mistakes that makes me feel like it's one of the worst Star Wars movies, but that's neither here nor there. But the EU, but the novelization, it doesn't focus on the Gungan War at all. It says it doesn't because it doesn't need to, right? The story's too busy as it is. Second off, it adds a lot of context to other things, like where Jar Jar becomes the Bombad Genital, right? I just said genital. I was trying to put a little, that little accent on the R, but then instead of sounding like an L, it sounded like an R or like a T. So, He's got bomb bad genitals, y'all. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah. Um, they actually addressed that by some of the more older and experienced generals being like, "Why the hell does this guy get to lead the army?" Apparently, they were a little upset about that, which makes sense because of course, they would be. Why would you make Jar Jar a general? What experience does he have? Which leads to the implication that Boss Nass is kind of an idiot. Um, but I think the biggest thing that it does, that it improves on, well, I'll add one other thing, is that it has more scenes between Padme and Anakin, which is good because it helps their relationship feel more in depth instead of the weird implications that we get with her being uh, someone going through puberty and him being a child. Although, from what I actually understand, George Lucas had originally wanted him to be older, which I think. Wait, did I read that? Or is that. He should have been older, regardless of whether or not he intended it. He should have been 11 or something, because 11 is just starting to get to the age where, you know, you're not necessarily, when you're like the early tween. So you could start be going through puberty, you might not be. It's still like very young, but it's not like creepy young, like Anakin, like the 9-year-old Anakin is. Don't get me wrong, Jake Lloyd is he did the best he could with what he had to work with, but I think that was a huge mistake. All he would have had to do is make him like literally 2 years older, and it would have been a lot less creepy because then you would have had someone like close. So you would want someone closer to Edward Furlong, you know, because then it would have been like, oh well, he's just he's starting to grow up. So he's getting into this weird thing where, he's been a slave all his life. You know, the only positive figure in his life is his mom. He finally meets all these people, goes off in this fantastical adventure, and then he makes connection with this woman. He doesn't have a proper upbringing, so he wouldn't really understand his feelings for her all that much. Like, are they sisterly? Are they romantic? What's the deal here? That would make a lot more sense. I think that was like just the biggest mistake right there, was making him that young, because it just makes the whole thing weird. Now once they get older, it's not so bad because then he's like 19 and she's like what, 24? That's a lot less creepy because they're both adults at that point, right? But it's just weird because of how much someone changes from the age of like 7 to 15. Like they literally go from goo goo gaga to hey, how you doing? You know? What was I saying? Oh yeah. So they definitely needed more scenes together. Um, because they just don't get enough scenes, and it doesn't come across as it makes it harder to justify his obsession with her. You have to. The biggest thing to make the prequels better is to fill in the blanks. Is to spend some time reading and thinking about it. And I don't mean stupid fan theories. I mean actual like good explanations for what's going on, because it can give you, because that actually makes them a lot better. Like thinking of the possibility that Anakin may have used the Force inadvertently to manipulate Padme's mind, right? Um, it could also be the trauma that she's having to deal with everything. I mean, assassination attempts. She's literally been in war, you know. I mean, she pretty much has the entire galaxy put on her freaking shoulders, man. Like, holy crap. Um, or the fact that the implication that the relationship is not as good as they say it is. They try to act like that they're super duper mega ultra in lovey dovey wovey, right? But here's the thing, are they? Or are they trying so hard to make it seem like they are? Like you ever see people that do that seem like they're trying way too hard, and you're like, something's not right here, guys. There's a couple of ways to look at it, and I could turn the AC. I'm sweating my ass off here. That's one of the fun parts. Is what exactly is it? And I think there's lots of ways to interpret it. Or the other thing is, did Palpatine manipulate it? Because remember, he's crazy powerful. And in the sequel trilogy, he even says that he basically created the dyad between Rey and uh, Kylo, right? So basically, he may have done the same thing with Padme. There's so many aspects to it that make it work, and it could even be a combination of all those things. So it actually ends up working out. Just like I learned about borderline personality disorder from someone deconstructing that Anakin likely has borderline personality disorder, which explains his emotional problems. You know, like it's not bad writing, he's mentally ill. And I mean, what's the best psychiatrist they have? Yoda going, mm. It's like, he's like, you know, you're just like, death is no biggie. Don't worry about it. It's not a great Yoda, whatever. And where's the psychiatrist? Where's some meds, man? Because he needs it big time. And so think about it. You got this kid who pretty much everyone in the Jedi Order was like, yeah, he's too old. And then you have multiple people being like, yeah, you're like the chosen one. You're going to be the greatest Jedi of all time. You know, and he's dealing with so many other things that he doesn't know how to process, you know, and likely a lot of trauma and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, he's probably going to come out just a teensy weensy bit messed up, wouldn't you say? I mean, hell, we come out messed up for things a lot simpler than being involved in a war and all that. Hey, look, we may be wage slaves, but we're not, slaves. We're not chattel slavery, so not really. So, but back to what I was saying about Phantom Menace is that one of the best things it does is it helps make the character of Jar Jar better because it actually gets into the mindset of Jar Jar. As a character, yeah, it actually justifies the way he acts. The truth is that when he said that he's clumsy, that's exactly it. He's clumsy, which, to be honest, we've all met people who are clumsy. Every single one of us, right? Hell, I'm pretty clumsy myself. I don't have steady hands, and hell, was it last month? I think I broke two different glasses. I'm pretty clumsy at times, and yeah, he's a little bit goofy, he's a little bit silly, but the truth is that he's actually an in-depth character once you kind of get into it. Like one of the things about him is that he's he's insecure. He's insecure about his clumsiness. I mean, he got banished from his home because he's so clumsy he offended their leader, who is obviously an idiot anyway, right? And while people might dislike him, you know, I don't know how much of an implication is that they hate him or that they wanted him banished, right? I mean, I remember Boss Nass is an idiot, probably. I mean, considering how he was like, yeah, I'm not gonna side with the Naboo, and then finally it took them like saying, oh, we prostrate ourselves, and he's like, okay, I guess I don't want to get slaughtered in a war, so hey, let's join forces. He's kind of an idiot, but then again, hey, politicians, right? Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so you actually see that Jar Jar is actually really insecure about his clumsiness, which leads a lot of which actually makes Phantom Menace look a lot better because when you see a lot of the digital acting of Jar Jar Binks, like you see that he's really unsure about himself. He is insecure, right? He's not sure what to do. He's not sure what to say, and he worries about how people see him. you know? Like even when he did the thing as the general, he wanted to be seen as a good general. He wanted to do a good job, you know? So he's not just this mindless idiot. He's actually a being with feelings and things like that. He's definitely put in over his head. He shouldn't have been the general of an army. But it was for a it's for a diversion anyway. And let's be honest, who is a better distraction than this slapstick asshole, right? So it made me like Jar Jar because it's like, oh wow, when you actually look at him like a character, I say human, but I know he's not a human, but look at him like a in-depth character with personality, you find that actually he's not that bad of a guy. Hell, I guarantee you, a lot of us know people who act similar to who's like that, who might be clumsy, a little bit silly, but they're also insecure about themselves, and they seem like they're not super competent at a lot of things. You know, I wouldn't say executive dysfunction, but look here, I'll show you. I'll show you how much I like Jar Jar. You see this guy right here? Look at that. Me said a Jar Jar Binks. I got my Jar Jar Binks plushie, and there ain't shit you can do about it. Oh, you was like in bomb bad trouble, you know. He's like, oh, big boomer, you know. I got my Jar Jar Binks plushie, and ain't nothing you can do about it, son. Yeah, I bought this on eBay. I spent money on this. Yeah. Okay, enough of that. That's what we call it. That's EGM, which electronic Gungan music. Yeah, patent pending. Wait, I can't do that. Disney has sued the shit out of me. Scratch that. But keep in mind of the date of the stream because if they use that idea, they got to give me something for it. They got to give me a writing credit at least. Anyway, uh, yeah. So I like Jar Jar now. I don't like the novelization of Attack the Clones. It's written by the same guy that writes those D&D books about that drow that uses two swords. I forget his name, Drizzt Odor or something. Drizzt, Drizzle, whatever. Uh, the one that everybody that plays everybody tries to well, at least at one point, everybody tried to copy because whatever. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, but I think Jar Jar has one of the best moments in the prequels. Like one of the best moments unironically in the prequels. I know I'm stopping a lot because I want to talk about Star Wars, but I like talking about Star Wars. So, check it. Okay, so the perfect example of how Jar Jar as an in-depth character with flaws combines with what is ultimately a well-written story. George Lucas not great at writing dialogue, and he definitely needs like a great editor to work with him so that he can make his movies better. Um, and he probably shouldn't direct because he doesn't have the energy for it. Again, he was stressed out about doing Return, and he was just so worried about control. He really wanted to do it himself, but he needs people to work with him to sort of manage him. But when it comes to writing stories in general, excluding dialogue, he can write fantastic stories if you just look at them, right? So in Attack the Clones, again, as hopefully anyone that's watching this knows, you have Padme is going to hide off on Naboo so that her and Anakin can be flirty with each other until she wears that sexy dress and tells him that how they can't be together, and he's like sweating. He's got his lightsabers turned on, right? Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, Robot Chicken is a great thing to make fun of that, and I I can't remember if it was the novelization of that or one of the other books where Padme's internal dialogue is her saying that she wants to wear something super sexy, but she also knows she shouldn't be acting like that. So she's kind of at a loss for herself, where because she's into it too, but she tries. It's similar to Leia and Han Solo, just in a way more toxic way, right? Anyway, the fuck am I saying? Oh yeah. Anyway, so okay, so she's off on Naboo, and Jar Jar is taking over for her because he's now the senator, taking over from Palpatine, which again is probably another manipulation by Palpatine. He wants to make sure that happens. So Jar Jar is insecure and he wants to do a good job, which as you can see when he tries to talk to Padme about, oh, I'm gonna do this with humility and blah blah, and she cuts him off. She's like, you don't have to be so formal. Just she's like, you'll do a good job, you'll do great, you know. So then it comes to the scene, uh, Chancellor Palpatine, Yoda, was it Yoda? I can't remember if Yoda was there right now. I just can't remember the scene specifically because there's so many of these Senate subcommittee meetings or whatever you want to call them. Um, Masamada and Jar Jar and Palpatine are there. I can't remember if Yoda was there too, but whatever, right? And they're talking about, they're like, we need an army. The Confederacy. I'm just gonna call them the Confederacy. The Confederacy, they've got an army of droids, man, and they're gonna like start a war. We need to get a military. I don't know why they're surfer guys, but they just go with it, right? We need an army, but we're gonna have to get Senate approval for the army, and that's gonna take forever. They're not gonna want to do anything, you know. Uh, and so they're like, if only we had, and then Palpatine is like, if only we had somebody that was willing to grant me emergency powers. Like, and of course, knowing Palpatine, you're like, oh, he's so slimy and skeezy, right? Like you just feel it that he's being so slimy and sneaky because it's so insincere and it's so well done because the acting is a little over the top. He's like, who would propose such a radical amendment? Right? And then Masamada's standing there and he literally like says just explicitly, he's like, if only Senator Amidala was here. And then the camera immediately cuts. Then it immediately cuts to Jar Jar looking unsure of himself. They almost explicitly was like, man, if only we had a good senator like Senator Amidala was here, she'd totally do it. You see the gears turning in Jar Jar's head. He's literally going like, I want to do good by Senator Amidala because that's who I'm covering for. And this is something that we need. So let me do it. Some people like to say it as, oh man, Jar Jar ruined the entire. Jar Jar caused all these problems to create the empire and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, because he was manipulated. Because one of his fatal flaws is he's insecure. He worries about what people think of him. And they manipulated that specific character aspect about him to be able to get the emergency powers they wanted. So I recommend anybody watch that scene again, and you're just gonna be like, oh, it's fucking genius, man. It's fucking genius. And it's stuff like that that made me love the prequels because it's genius. It's 100% genius. And it's a good example of even with CGI, the facial acting with someone like Jar Jar is on point because I don't think he even says anything right there. He just looks, you know. And again, I'm one of those people that's like, oh, too much CGI, ugh. But even then, it's like still, it's really good, especially for the time. And so, I like Jar Jar. That's the long short of the story, because it actually really once you look at him in that way, it really adds to the story. George Lucas is better than he himself makes himself out to be. You know, I just don't think he's a great director because he really wants things his way and without people to bounce ideas off of. Some of his ideas aren't great. And I think the biggest thing is that he's not a great director because he has these ideas, but he doesn't necessarily know how to express them. Um, and I take this theory, this game theory, or whatever that guy says, about when Ray Park was talking about playing Darth Maul. He says the only direction that he got from George Lucas in terms of like how to act, the few speaking scenes that he had, was just to be like more evil, which is like the least specific, one of the least specific directions you could get other than just be better. And it's like, that it makes it for someone to be like that, it's probably that he's just not good at directing people. He doesn't know necessarily how to express specifically what he wants, you know. And a lot of people have said this, that part of the thing is that because George Lucas was a legend by the time the prequels were made, nobody wanted to challenge him because it's like, who are you going to challenge? One of the most successful directors of all time? for who? You? You're a nobody. You know? I think the most prominent actor at the time, and when the prequel trilogy was first made, was fucking Brian Blessed playing Boss Nass. You know, he was like the most prominent actor in the whole thing. I think. I'm trying to think about all the actors, but I'm pretty sure he was, because like Liam Neeson, of course, he a lot of the actors were known, Ewan McGregor, Liam Neeson, but they were and Natalie Portman, but they never did anything that huge. Like what was the biggest thing Liam Neeson did by then? Dark Man? I'm not sure on this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it's something like that. They weren't insanely huge, right? But Brian Blessed, well, he was well known because he'd been doing stuff for decades. He played Augustus Caesar in I Claudius amazingly, because of course he's a huge ham, which makes him perfect for Boss Nass. But in I Claudius, he has one of the best lines of anything I've ever heard when they was talking about how his daughter was very promiscuous, and he just basically shouts this line where he's like, "Is there anyone in Rome who hasn't slept with my daughter?" Yeah, it's a good line. Brian Blessed, he's a blessing, is what he is. It's great. So yeah, I mean, what are they gonna do? Tell the guy who essentially created the blockbuster, you know, the again one of the most successful movie directors of all time, and tell him, "Cha, you know what? Uh-uh." It worked a lot better when the original Star Wars was made. When people like, "Oh yes, hey, how's it going, Daniel?" I'm just talking nonstop about Star Wars because I love to talk nonstop about Star Wars. Uh, because I started talking about Dune and then it goes into Star Wars, which it's pretty much hand in hand, right? Because I like to talk about how I actually like Jar Jar, and you can't, and anybody can fight me on that all they want. Yeah, see, I'm just trying to finish this up because I've got to get ready for my trip. I was gonna do it on Sunday, and then Rose reminded me. She's like, no, we're leaving Sunday morning. Like I got to get up at 5 a.m. Oh, nice. Thank you. Thank you for watching, man. It's really it does mean a lot. Even if you're not talking, that's cool too, because I can talk forever and ever about Star Wars. I'll give a great example. When Rose's sister was getting married, um, to her to was it Rose's sister was getting married to her current wife? I say current wife. I don't know. They're not gonna get divorced. Oh yeah, there's that fan theory. I think that fan theory, it's an interesting what do you call it? It's an interesting fan theory, and I do like the fact that what was it? Was it Rebels or was it Clone Wars? I think Clone Wars. They kind of referenced it a little bit with one of their episodes that had Jar Jar and C-3PO. And again, a great example of how Jar Jar can be fun if he's done right. Because that episode, it's um Nemoidians. That's the Trade Federation guys. They're on a planet with the Nemoidians. Padme gets kidnapped, and so it's up to C-3PO and Jar Jar Binks to save her, right? And of course, you might roll your eyes and be like, "Oh no, this is going to be cringe," right? No, it's hilarious, and because they because they know that she's got Jedi protection, right? Well, for whatever reason, Anakin's not there, or any other Jedi. So Jar Jar at one point comes up. So I guess with help of C-3PO and other stuff, Jar Jar comes up and he's wearing the cloak and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, this has got to be a reference to that fan theory. It has got to be. That episode is hilarious. I love, love, love the Clone Wars series. The CG one. I hate the fact that they had two series called Clone Wars because one of them's Clone Wars and there's the Clone Wars, but I can never remember it. Um, I can never remember which one is which. I don't particularly care for the Samurai Jack one. I call it that because I don't think it's bad. I think the animation is great, and I think it's overall like well written for what it is. I just I still prefer the CGI one because Dave Filoni, he does a great job for the most part. That CGI Clone Wars is some stuff, man. Because especially since one of the best things about Star Wars is that these other parts of it can really expand on the source material well enough to help justify a lot of things, right? And I justify good things. That's one of the things I didn't like about Solo was that they tried so hard to justify aspects of aspects about like Han and the Millennium Falcon and Chewie and all that kind of stuff. It's like I don't need an explanation about why Chewie has a nickname. I know why people have nicknames because we do that. It's called truncated language, guys. Come on. Nicknames have been around for quite a long time. I don't need an explanation for it. And they have the dice thing and the why his name is Solo and all that kind of stuff. A little bit is okay. Don't get me wrong. A little bit of nudge, nudge, wink, wink is okay. But when you do it too much, it's like we don't have to have an explanation about everything. Sometimes it's better not to know. Um, Plus that movie is just too dark, and I don't mean like metaphorically. I mean visually. It's so dark. It's like I'm not even watching a movie. It's just a black screen at this point. Unless you have one of those extremely high quality TVs, which I don't have. Even my monitor. I used to have a really good monitor, but it started to go bad, so I gotta get another one eventually. But I gotta get a good graphics card too. You really gotta pair. Really gotta pair them together. You can't just get one and then the other and not have a match, because then it makes one or the other pointless. But what was I saying? Yeah, but it's okay to have some cool justifications, like the very first episode of Clone Wars has Yoda on a planet with the with some of the clones, and they're like, "We're expendable. We're just clones," and they're like, "No, you guys are all individuals in the Force. You may be clones, but you're still all individuals." And the Clone Wars does a great job at helping to individualize all these different clone characters. They're all voiced by the same dude. They all look almost exactly the same. Of course, they have different hairstyles and stuff. But they still make them all individuals. So I can't remember that one episode, but it has like a little group of them on a moon or something, and they all have different personalities, and different nicknames and stuff. And it's so good, right? Of course, Ahsoka, fantastic character, and the whole storyline with her. Some people like criticize the Clone Wars that Clone Wars movie when it first came out. They're like, "Oh, of course, right?" But it's like, no, it's pretty good. But then you go and watch the show, and you're like, "Holy crap, it's amazing!" To have this random character that isn't really even hinted at in the movies, but it's done so well that you love it, and it's justified why she basically isn't present in the story, of course, with everything. It's great, you know, the characterization and everything. That's why I feel like that's probably one of the biggest things with Disney is that they kind of try too hard, and it's like, guys, less is more. Dial it back just a little bit. Don't try so hard. Have fun with it, cause it's supposed to be fun anyway. In my opinion, it should be fun. I like to have fun. I mean, I haven't watched any of the new stuff. I'm just been kind of burned out on it. I wasn't really a huge fan of Kenobi, which is unfortunate because it's like I love Ewan McGregor. He's great. The memes, man. I wouldn't say it was horrible, and then of course there's all the weird stuff involving Moses Ingram, but of course I also say it like this is I'm always distrusting of like any corporation. I think that sometimes they have, of course there's lots of assholes in the universe, don't get me wrong, who want to just loudly be assholes, but I also think that corporations will astroturf sometimes to expand something. You know, what is it? A perfect example is I read this years ago about Michael Jackson. Back in the 80s, there was a lot of rumors about weird stuff that Michael Jackson did, like trying to buy the skeleton of Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man, as he's nicknamed. He never actually tried to do that, but apparently rumors and stuff like that he created himself because he learned a long time ago no press is bad press. If they're talking about you, if you're in the media, then it's fine. You know, of course, as long as you're not doing anything illegal or getting put in jail. But if they're talking about you, they're talking about you. So sometimes I do think corporations intentionally, well, astroturf or do other things so they can drum up controversy for basically free advertisement, right? Don't get me wrong, Moses Ingram is a fantastic actor. I will say in that I don't think that it's I don't know if it, I don't even think the writing was well, there's aspects of the writing I didn't like, but I don't think she did a bad job. I think that there was like the way it was directed was a little wonky, but I think it's because more or less because the writing was a little wonky too. I think she could have done an amazing job had the writing been tweaked somewhat because they kind of made her like a secondary main character, which is nothing wrong with that, but I also had read the Kenobi book and I wanted something that more focused on Kenobi because the Kenobi book is amazing. I love it. Now they actually do an example of the justification sort of thing that I was talking about that I think is fine. They make the point that so he goes by Ben Kenobi, right? In he goes by Ben Kenobi on Tatooine, right? And he interacts with these people a lot because he's got his chronic hero syndrome, right? He wants to help people and he keeps getting involved and helping people, and it is a problem for when you're trying to hide out in the desert to protect Luke, right? But they do make the point where they're like, where someone asks him if he's related to some other Kenobis that's on Tatooine, and he's like, "No, I'm not." So that slight little bit is like, oh, see, that's why he can be named Ben Kenobi, and no one's like, "Hey, it's that guy." They're like, "He's just a guy named Ben Kenobi." You know, just the same as somebody else might be named, you know, what's a name that's not super common, um, that I know of. I can't think of one right now. I don't know why I can't think of one. Thompson. Thompson. That's an not it's not an uncommon last name, but it's not a super common last name. So if I see someone named Thompson, my first I had, in fact I had people in school that were like a handful of grades higher than me that had the same last name, and they were like, "Are you related to this person?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know who they are. I've never met them." Granted, with my low population in the state, it's possible that we're related way, way back, but but I don't think so because my last name is un. It's not super common, but um, it's not. I wouldn't call it rare either. Uh, you know, stuff like that is all right. Just like they also justify. Well, I think justifications are generally better if it's in a book because a book has a lot more content than like a TV show or a movie, usually, depending. Um, and it's okay to justify it's okay to justify some stuff, just as long as it's not like, you know, over the top. And I think, and again, that goes back to what I said about Solo. They kind of go over the top with it, and that's a little. But what show was it? Of course, I liked the Book of Boba Fett. I thought it was fantastic because um, Nomura, I can't remember his last name right now, but he of course does a fantastic job. He's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. Um, that whole show is pretty good. The Mandalorian is very good. It's like yeah. See, guys, that's what you do is because one of the problems they had with the sequel trilogy was merchandising. People didn't really want to buy the merchandise. Like you could go into a store and see the Admiral Holdo and the Rose action figures would just be there'd be like 50 on the shelf and they'd all be on clearance because nobody really wanted to buy them, you know. But here comes Grogu, here comes Baby Yoda, Baby Yoda, Baby Yoda, and of course that stuff's selling like hotcakes. Now, how intentional that was, I don't know, but I do know that in the end it worked out for them. It's like, yeah, see, merchandise is driven by a lot of things, guys. And part of it is people, you know, people liking the characters and things like that. But I think there's also a lot of economic reasons and stuff why people aren't buying merchandise as much as they used to. Like kids, for example, it's a lot easier to have them like play on an iPad and things like that than it is to go and buy a $20 toy every weekend or something like that. Because instead you can have them download a free app and then once a month give them $5 in Roblox or some Robux, I think it's called. Um, because then they'll play that for hours and hours and hours, right? You know, of course that's why so many companies are trying to get into mobile gaming is because it's a great way to make some money. But yeah, merchant, especially like as the economy downturns, like nobody wants to buy a figure that costs 15 bucks, right? Um, Especially because they remember, in the early 2000s when they might have still been buying action figures, and oh, the same action figure cost $7, right? Which I know you have to be realistic. You can't be like what's his name, Michael Douglas in falling over, uh, where you're like, where you're arguing with somebody about the cost of a Coke, right? All the political economic stuff aside, we do you it goes back to that to like how I like to talk about acceptance, right? You do have to accept your reality, and if it costs what it costs, well, it costs what it costs, and you have to decide whether or not it's worth it to buy it. Uh, and I think that's the thing is that a lot of people looking at it and they're saying, well, it's not really worth it. You know, of course, thrifting has become so big, and it's great actually. Hell, I buy a lot of stuff on eBay. That's how I got that Jar Jar Binks plushie because I bought it off eBay. Man, I love Jar Jar Binks. He's so much fun when done right. I think he's a little they kind of overdose on him in the movie, but he's all right. He said, "Oh, muy muy, I love you." I mean, it's good for the memes now. You have to like something that you can like unironically and ironically equally. That's not to say that liking something ironically or unironically on its own is necessarily bad. But I think the best things, the things that stick with us, is the things that we can both take seriously and have fun with. But it's like I was talking to someone else's stream. I asked them what their favorite guilty pleasure movie is on Kaz, and she said it was You Got Mail, which I'm not huge on romantic movies, and plus that was in the 90s, so I cared a lot more about video games and Pokemon than watching a romantic comedy with Tom Hanks in it. But I pointed out that my one of my favorite guilty pleasures is the Super Mario Brothers movie, the original, right? Uh, which I'll go on to say real quick that the current one is good. I wish they didn't do so much pop casting, where they're always like, well, we got to get these big names that everybody knows, instead of giving like smaller voice actors a chance. I don't think necessarily that Charles Martinet should have done it. I mean, he's retiring anyway. He retired anyway, so it's like, yeah, he probably had no interest in doing an entire movie. Um, even though he can do a normal, semi-normal Mario voice pretty well. It's like, yeah, I can understand not getting him, but then there are cases like I think the Sonic movie, how they got Ben Schwartz, instead of what's his face, the guy that mostly does it in the games, who I think Ben Schwartz does a good job now, but I think the guy from the games is would have been better. But that's neither here nor there. I think a lot of it is that pop casting sort of thing, right? Let's get the big name actors in it, which is nothing wrong with that because a lot of these big name actors are great because are big names because they're great. Like Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. Granted, Iron Man helped bring him back, but the fact of the matter is he was a big name that everybody knew, and he played the role so perfectly. Um, what's his name? Chris. Oh, I can't. I don't know why I can't think of his name. The guy that played Captain America, whatever his name is. I love him. He's so funny because I remember seeing him years ago in a Not Another Teen Movie, which I think is also an amazingly hilarious movie. Um, and he was so funny in that. He was probably the one of the best parts about the Fantastic Four movies, possibly the only good part, depending on your perspective. And then they got him to play Captain America, who was like the polar opposite of Johnny Storm, and he does it perfectly. I love him. He's great. I want to I want to have his babies. That being said, so sometimes it's okay to have podcasting. Chris Pratt, he's great. A lot of the actors, when Disney hires people, they almost always get an amazing choice. Like when they dub the Ghibli films, granted, a lot of the names are big names, but they do a perfect job. So I can't necessarily criticize it. It's just it would be nice to see smaller actors getting opportunities. Because that's the thing is, if you think about it, you go look to the first big movie that some of these actors did. When they first did them, they were nobodies. Then they did this movie and they were somehow absolutely perfect for the role, and then soon, boom, they're mega ultra stardom, right? Look at Mark Hamill. Look at what he did before he did Star Wars. You can find like lots of stuff. You can find clips of it and everything he did that isn't Star Wars up until he became popular for doing things like playing the trickster, playing the Joker, and other stuff like that. And he was a nobody. Even Harrison Ford, I mean, he was practically a nobody. I mean, considering the fact they wanted they considered getting Christopher Walken, right? They was just like, he's just somebody, right? Carrie Fisher, all these people, they were nobodies. Which sounds kind of mean, but it's true. They weren't big names, but they were perfect for the roles. Harrison Ford was so perfect for Han Solo that pretty much they're just like, yeah, you just do your own dialogue because you're going to be better than anything George Lucas can write. It's like what I'd like to tell people. That moment in Empire, how he improvised the "I know" thing. That is so Han Solo, so classic Han Solo that you just can't. It doesn't compare to just about anything, right? You know, things like that, right? Heck, even of course, the biggest name there was Alec Guinness. I think he originally wanted Toshiro Mifune because he took a lot of inspiration from Japanese things as well. But I think, of course, Alec Guinness did an amazing job. It's just he hated Star Wars. So, but the good thing about it is he made so much damn money because I think he took like a percentage of the profits that the movie were going to make and ended up making so much money he could do whatever he wanted for the rest of his life. Because I guess he figured it was going to be big or at least big enough where he was going to make money on it. But I do love the history of Star Wars about how nobody thought it was going to do well, that he kept bouncing from studio to studio till Fox was like, yeah, fine, we'll do it. And it wasn't a case of they're like, oh, we think it's going to be big. They were literally like, yeah, it'll probably do okay. To the point that they actually had to threaten some theaters that they weren't going to show their big movie if they didn't also show Star Wars because they put a lot of money and time in it. They're like, well, we got to make money, right? I can't even remember what the name of this other big movie was because it's based on a book. It was going to be their Oscar winner for this year, and ultimately it became forgotten because Star Wars, right? Um, and of course it blew up. And when the contracts and all that were signed, George Lucas kept 100% of the merchandising rights. Can you imagine that after Star Wars blew up? Like, can you imagine just like going into the boardroom or whatever, and the guys will like have their hands in their head, and they're like, "Oh, we screwed up. We could have been rich." That's of course why Star Wars is so heavily merchandise driven, is because whoever owns Star Wars owns the merchandising, so they make just oodles and oodles of money off of it. That's of course I feel like part of the reason why they're trying to shift focus away from movies and other things, uh, because they're trying to drive that merchandising sales because that's a big portion of their money. But going back to the novelizations, one of my favorite novelizations is Revenge of the Sith because, like Phantom Menace, it expands on it, but it expands on it a lot. Like it actually goes into like the internal turmoil of Anakin. Like it also points out one of the reasons why he's so adamant about being a master isn't just like about a promotion. It's about there's a portion of the archives that he can access as a master that he can't as just a regular Jedi Knight. That he hopes will have the information that he needs to be able to keep Padme from dying. and other aspects of that, like his internal emotional turmoil and things like that. That it's really good. But the other thing I like to point out is how some people criticized it when it came out that he just jumped over to the dark side just as easily as he could. Well, here's the thing. The thing I like to point out. First off, he's already been on a precarious edge with a lot of reasons, right? They're already unsure about him and there's all this stuff going on. And then it turns out that one of his best friends in the whole wide world is a freaking Sith Lord. The Sith Lord they've been looking for, who also has massive power in the galaxy. So there we go. I'm finished with this. Let's get the good look on it. Yeah, let's zoom in on that. Look at that. Some of the stitches are a little wonky, but I think it'll be okay. That adds personality to it. That's what I'm gonna say. Look at that. Heck yeah. Now, of course, I'm gonna have to iron it out to get these creases and stuff out. And then I've got to frame it. Ooh, see, it's in 3D when you do this. But that's also part of why I use this frame to help straighten it out. Plus, it makes it easier to see on there. Let me get this out of here. What's funny is I ended up buying black fabric so I could start on this, and then I realized I've got an entire roll of it in my other room. Wow, this thing's tough. Damn, bro. I'm trying to be careful because I'm not very finesseful, and I will break stuff very easily. Again, it goes back to me saying I'm a little clumsy because I can easily break stuff just by trying to do stuff with it. But back to what I was saying about Anakin. So he finds this out. He tells the council, and the council's like, hey, we're basically going to depose you, which was, of course, ended up being a stupid idea because he was like, hey, that was part of his plan, right? So when he comes in, and it has this amazing moment where, uh, Mace Windu's supposedly kicking his ass, right? And he's like, no, he needs to stand trial. We can't just kill him. That's just basically murder. And then here's where it becomes amazing. What does Mace Windu say? He says he's too dangerous to be kept alive. Exactly what was said to him by Palpatine about Dooku, who he personally feels bad about. So he is seeing Mace Windu go down a same path that he himself regretted. So he's like, no, don't do that. Especially with Palpatine going, oh, I'm too weak. No. Right? His little fake thing, right? So then he stops him. And then, of course, Palpatine's like, I was faking the whole time. And, kills him. So now you have this guy who is technically a member of the council, even if he's not a master, who just essentially helped a Sith Lord kill one of the leading members of the Jedi Council. There's going to be no way that you can twist that doesn't make him look like a bad guy. So he has no chance. It's not like he's going to be like, hey, Yoda, and Yoda's going to be like, oh, no, it's cool, bro. No, there's no way that he can make it look good, right? So, and especially with everything else that's gone on to that point, he's lost everything. The only thing he has left is Padme. The Jedi are not going to help him. They certainly aren't going to help him in any way. But Palpatine, he promised to help him, and all this kind of stuff. So it's like, he's lost everything at this point. The only thing he has left is Padme. So he's like, fuck it, right? And some people have criticized him murdering children. Like, oh, he just immediately goes to murder children. He did in the previous movie. Because he says it. Not just the men, but the women and the children. See, that shows you kind of how somebody can devolve into that. It starts by being willing to slaughter people that you don't consider equal to you or non-human, right? That's how it starts. And then eventually gets to the point to where you can justify murdering other people. That, of course, goes to the stuff I was saying last time about why you have to have these limits for yourself, because it becomes really, really easy to justify. If you can justify it one way, you can eventually justify it in another way. until you eventually devolve into doing it, because again, there's so many, even if it's like fictional stories about how someone falls into corruption, right? Because it starts off a little bit here, a little bit there, until eventually you're doing it all, right? It's it's similar to how the Columbia, or was it the Challenger, the one that exploded in like 2000 something, um, that had a problem because the heat shielding gradually, as they continued to use it, the heat shielding kept getting damaged. And instead of looking at it from a variance from its original position, they looked at it as variance from its previous position. It became like a normalized variance or something, like there's a term for it. But the problem is that it was so far removed from the original condition that it became unsafe. But they didn't think of it like that. They looked at it as a variance from its previous position. You know, it's kind of like that. It's easy to say, hey, I'm willing to do this for this much. And then, kind of like haggling for your morality, right? You know, what are you willing to do for $100? Well, if you're willing to do it for 100, why not 99? Why not 98? Why not 90? Why not 80? Why not 75? Why not 40? You know. So again, he murdered defenseless people before. Yeah, you can look at them as violent, barbarian, brutal people, but then it goes to this. It says, hey, these Jedi, they're conspire. Palpatine's one of his best friends, right? Or whatever. He's his mentor, or whatever you want to call it. The Jedi, he's like, the Jedi, they've been conspiring against me all along. They wanted to overthrow me. They wanted to be the dictators of the galaxy. And you look at stuff like with Ahsoka and say, look at all the stuff they've done to you. Look how they've denied you. They say you can't have a wife. They told you you're supposed to be the chosen one, and then they treat you like shit. Look at all that they've done. Hey, guess what? Look at Dooku. What was he? He was a Jedi. And he started this war. How many people have died because of the Jedi? The Jedi, 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 right? So you see these, and it's easy to look at them and say, are they innocent children, or are they the Hitler Youth, right? And again, it's a perfect thing for Palpatine to tell him to do anyway, because he's like, I pledge my loyalty to you, Palpatine. He's like, you do? Cool. You willing to do this? It's the if you're so evil, kill this bunny or whatever, right? I think South Park did a great one on that episode about Pip, where it's like, if you're really that evil, here, do this evil thing. Because then at that point, you're stuck. Because again, what did he do? He did the evil thing. Because again, what would happen if he didn't do it? Palpatine would probably kill him. Or at least try to. What? It's not like he had that much of a choice. But of course, it all comes together because Palpatine is the chess master. Look at that, though. Again, I think if you really look at the stories and analyze them, you can really see that a lot of it actually makes sense. And I think the biggest thing about Darth Vader, about Anakin, is to keep in mind is that you don't go from a shining hero to a literal mass murderer without some sort of fall. You know, you're not like, kittens and puppies, right? And then go to say, you know what? I think I'm going to support killing billions of people on essentially a defenseless planet. Alderaan, right? There has to be something that happens. And if you look at it like that it's actually supposed to be a fallen hero story. It's not like Luke, who is the hero's journey. It's a hero that falls, right? A flawed human that eventually falls due to a variety of things, circumstances, experience, et cetera, et cetera. And then it makes a lot more sense. Again, people want to see him as this shining hero, but a shining hero, it is very difficult for them to become what is essentially the ultimate evil. Because again, he basically was the ultimate evil. He did some very bad things, and that's kind of why he had to die in the end to justify his recovery, or whatever you want to call it. What do you call it? Redemption. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word. Anyway. Again, I love Star Wars, and I can talk about it forever. Again, I've read so many of the EU books, and I recommend a lot of people to read a bunch of them. Because a lot of them really expand on the story and make you go, oh, that's really cool, when you think about it in that way. There we go. So see, I got 2 down. I have to try to not be bothered by some of the wonky stitching in here, because it'll make me want to like redo it. And I really shouldn't redo that. Oh, wait, hold on. In DBT, one of the things that we do is learning methods of practicing mindfulness, right? There's the how skills, which is how you act mindfully, and then the what skills, right? Which is what you do.
to be mindful. So in the how skills, or in the what skills, there's there's one, mindfully, effectively, and non-judgmentally. And so by saying that I should or should not, I'm creating a judgment on myself. So what I have to do is look at it in a different manner, saying that I should not. Instead see, I'm trying to judge again. You see, it kind of goes upon itself. I don't think it would be an effective use of my time, nor do I think it would be a problem. So it is most likely more effective for me to focus my time and energy on working on one of these other ones. Which, here's the third one that I'm working on. Look at that. The camera's not looking all great. I still got to put some work in my camera's setup. I'll eventually probably get an actual good camera so I don't have to use my damn cell phone. But so this one I decided to start on the logo, and you see it's making pretty good progress. So I definitely think I'll be done with them by December, probably sooner. Um, it depends on when I get the time. Which okay, it doesn't necessarily depend on when it depends on when I can manage my time to do that, right? But see, that's that's two of them down. So I got a third one, and then I got other stuff. I'm gonna add into that. Woohoo! So before I go, where is it? I'm gonna go into some other things. See, this right here is gonna be for the sister of one of my coworkers. Cause see, one of my coworkers, she's like, why don't you make me a cross stitch? I'm like, okay, because I'm literally that's literally how I am with a project where it's someone's like, here's a project idea, and I'm like, shrug my shoulders and I do it, because I needed one anyway. So here's, I know I probably showed this before, but losing my stitches everywhere. So, but there's my triple triad board right here, because again, the triple triad stuff was made by Bandai in 1999, and it's a very, I wouldn't say it's heavily sought after, but it's a very very valuable collector's item. I mean, the cheapest card you're gonna find is maybe $5 to $7, and the most expensive sell for like $100 or more, right? I almost have a complete set. But it also came with a paper board that looks like the triple triad board from Final Fantasy VIII, right? The problem is that board is very expensive because it's a very valuable thing, and I want it to play. So what I actually did was I measured out the size of the cards, and then visually, instead of like using a converter or something, I visually made this based on the board. Which, if you look up triple triad board, Final Fantasy VIII, you'll see kind of what I'm getting at. This is because the background is kind of this off-white color. Um, and there's a lot of accoutrements I need to add. It's got these little fang-like shapes right here that I've got to add. It actually says triple triad, and I have to find a font that matches that. It's kind of like, it's similar to Papyrus, but not exactly, so I got to find a way to do that. I want to put like a score thing at the bottom, where, because the way the score is based on how many cards you flip, so it's like, all the way from 9 to 0, but and when it's 5-5, it's even, so like put a big 5 and then 9, 8, 7, 5, all that, possibly. But I've got, and then it also has this big intricate design in the middle that I'm thinking about adding in some kind of thing. Um, just again, so I can have a board, right? And then I could probably mount this onto something, maybe a piece of foam core or something, and then have it as my triple triad board. It was a kind of a, what was it, the Thanos moment. It was like, fine, I'll do it myself. That's one of the best things about cross stitching, is that often you get into a mood where you're like, I'll just do it myself. Just like I have this old game called Pirates Collect. It's called the Constructible card game. Um, and they did have a board game version that came with this big like vinyl mat or something. But of course, the problem with vinyl is it's going to get worn out of shape, all that kind of stuff. What I was thinking about is actually like taking what, like one of those things that looks like a topographical map, and then like making a board with that. Like get some fabric that's like this color, like blue for the ocean, make islands, make the different hazards that you can encounter and stuff like that, and like just make a big old map with it that could be that the game could be played with. Because I've had these things for a very long time, since like the early 2000s. which they're actually getting very valuable now too because they're starting to disappear. Um, I might have to do some stuff on that too, and I've kept it for a very long time. I've got a big collection. So anyway, these are my triple triad cards. Since we're talking about triple triad, triple triad, triple triad, triple triad. So as you can see, I've got just about the whole collection. Which again, anyone who's played Final Fantasy VIII knows exactly what I'm talking about. The Cactuar. I love Cactuar. He's one of my favorite characters in it. And I saw one of the Final Fantasy games actually had like a conductor that was a Cactuar, and he's hilarious. So I love Cactuar. He's great. They're so funny and they act all weird. Let's see. The Poo Poo card, that's what that thing guys call it. He's called Poo Poo. He's an alien. And then this guy, Jumbo Cactuar, he's hilarious in Final Fantasy VIII because, again, he's like a big Cactuar, but he's got that goofy little mustache, you see. Look at that. But what's funny is that when you use Squall, when you use his Limit Break Renzokuken, um, there's a couple of bosses in the game that you can use his Limit Break on that have like special animations, and he has these funny ones where he like reacts in a really silly way. It's hilarious. And of course, as you go up, they get more valuable. Then you start getting the Guardian Forces, all the way from Chubby Chocobo, Angelo, all that kind of stuff. And the problem is because also I try to save money because again, if I bought them all individually, I'd be spending way too much money. I'm not that obsessed where I want to just blow all my money to collect something. I don't normally collect things, but I want these so I can also play with them because each of them I actually have in card protectors. See, because they're also dual-sided. Because, one person's red, one person's blue. When you do the thing, you flip it and all that. Anyway, so I buy a lot of lots, so I also have a lot of extra cards. I've got one card that I even have like four of, and it's like, ugh. I need to sell them, but then you sell them on eBay, and then you got to put that on your taxes and all that kind of stuff. The only two I'm missing is I'm missing the Phoenix card. Also, Doom Train is one of my favorite GFs in Final Fantasy VIII. And Kyros. But I have all the other ones. And I've got a bunch of these because like these are supposed to be used to like cover up your deck or whatever when you play. And then I have these rule cards. See, it says card ass. Let's see. Get my camera right. And can I get to focus? There you go. Card ass. Ass as the Angry Video Game Nerd says. And it's got phone numbers and stuff like that. I highly doubt they work anymore. But it's got the whole rules list and stuff like that. So what I was actually thinking of doing was actually taking some of the extras and doing a giveaway if I decide to play. Well, here, since I'm not going to be stitching anymore, let me how to adjust this. Wait, we can put it right side up. Aha! Get it to focus. Yeah, there we go. Don't look at my underwear. We're packing. Don't judge me. Anyway, so I've got so many extras. I was thinking about doing a giveaway. Cause see, I've got so many extras due to the lots that I've been buying. But I've also got a bunch of other interesting cards from some of these lots. Because Bandai did so many cards with like Final Fantasy VIII, it's ridiculous. A lot of them are these art cards that have the characters on them. But they even have these because they've got a couple of different sets, and they even have this art museum set, which again you saw that had like character drawings. But let me pull this up. And by pull it up, I mean pull it out. Now that sounds terrible. Don't pull it out. So of course, one of my favorite characters. I love the design of a Leviathan. You even gotta get the light on it. No. So it's a drawing card, art museum card that has the drawing by what's his name? Tetsuya Nomura? Yeah, Tetsuya Nomura. And it looks fantastic, and they're not very common either. The triple triad cards are very common, and a lot of the card ass cards are, but these aren't very common. But in one of the sets I bought, I also ended up getting Ifrit and Renoa, which are super nice. And as much as I liked it, I wouldn't mind collecting something that has a decent amount of value. I was thinking about doing like a giveaway or something, because I could sell it, but then it might be more valuable for me to do a giveaway because I don't particularly care for that. I like the Leviathan one. That's my guy. I love Leviathan, but the rest of them might even keep the Ifrit card, but it's just I got a lot of planning to do with that because the I'm not a huge collector of stuff. I used to have a good video game collection, but long story short, that got taken unrighteously. I'll say that extrajudicially. That's that you could argue it's like that. No, it got stolen basically. Long story short, it was stolen. And I had so much cool stuff too. I had games that now are very, very valuable. I got lucky though, because my copy of Rule of Rose for PlayStation 2 was with my ex-wife, and that's very valuable. So at least there's that. And I have stuff that I've had, like I still have my original Nintendo 64 and original copies of a lot of these games, like Ocarina of Time, Mario Kart, stuff like that. Games that are very valuable now. GoldenEye, and I also have like a bunch of PSP stuff, including the Persona games, which are very valuable. So I did lose a lot of value, but I do have stuff that's pretty valuable. Like I've got original Pokemon games and stuff like that that all work just fine. I just I don't know, because I generally prefer to emulate. But I do now have an original one of those PS1s, not the PlayStation, or not the big boxy PlayStation, but the little small one, the PS1 as they called it. I have one of those now, so because we have Namco Museum 1, because it's got a game on there that Rose really likes called Toy Pop. It's the only, well, it's no longer the only way to get the game. Now you can buy it separately on the Switch for like $8, but for a long time it was really the only way to get it was in that collection. So she really likes that game. So we play it on occasion. I would like to get one of those little portable screens that you can attach to it because I remember that years ago it had a little portable screen, but those screens are very, very valuable. So it's like, maybe not. And you know, but again, at least I can justify a lot of things because I still have a lot of my old PlayStation games. So when I emulate Final Fantasy 8 or 7 or whatever, guess what? I'm not I'm not breaking a law. Which I will say, I don't emulate any games I don't own. That's all I'm going to say about that. I don't do anything illegal whatsoever. I don't pirate anything. Everything I own is legitimate. This is official statement. It is admissible in court. Anyway, we actually get like some of these things like Disney Plus and all that kind of stuff with our internet because you know how it is. Everything's a bundle now, so we get all that kind of stuff. So when we watched Kenobi and all that, we watch it through our TV because we just have that attached to our accounts. Plus, a lot of stuff we can watch is on Peacock, and which they do a lot of free stuff. And then they also have our TV's a Vizio, and they have a lot of free stuff too. So we watch a lot of stuff through that. Like we wanted to watch I Love Lucy, and they have that for free. So it's like, oh yeah, there you go. You know. Plus, YouTube's been doing a lot of free stuff. The only thing about YouTube when they have free movies, they edit them too. But it's weird because the editing is inconsistent. Like that one movie where that girl pretends to be a guy, and then she gets into a dude, and then she like rips her top open at the end to be like, "Hey, look, guess what?" Right? And he's like, "Oh." They leave that in, but then other movies they edit them like to have different they like take out some of the cussing and stuff like that. It's like that's really inconsistent. I mean, again, now I'm an advocate saying that like topless males versus topless females isn't it like doesn't need to be treated so heavily different, right? Because it's a bit sexist and all that kind of stuff. Like especially because like a guy can, as I pointed out the other day to I pointed out she knows this too, but as I was saying the other day, a guy can walk around and he can have torpedoes sticking out of his shirt, but if a woman who literally just had to work 8 hours, wearing the most uncomfortable bra in the universe decides to go to the corner store without a bra and she's the devil, and it's like that's just stupid. You know, let's not do that. How about it's I mean it's not like she's flashing everybody. It's just a body part that pokes out. Guess what? As a biological male, I have body parts that poke out too. Mostly this fat ass I have. I didn't say that. I did say that, but you can't see it. I'm not doing a hot tub stream. I don't care how much you pay me because I don't want to monetize my content. Which of course I probably I keep forgetting. I should probably post the link, which I've got the Ko-fi thing, but as I've mentioned before, none of that goes to me. Uh, I will anything that I get, I to be to be at the demand of somebody else. Like I've actually been getting offers from what's it called? Stream Elements? Was it Stream Elements? No, I think so. I can't remember. And they're like, "Oh, you can do the Raid Shadow Legends thing." And it's like I have no interest in playing the mobile game, so I have no interest in advertising a game. I don't know if I even would like. Maybe I would like it, but I don't want to do that because again, I don't want to be that guy to say that oh, sellouts, right? But I do think there's a lot of cases where um, people become too reliant on that, and then that can really negatively impact their content. Like I'm among the crowd to say that part of the problem with someone like Cinemasker with James Rolfe and the AVGN is that he absolute for quite a while he absolutely had to like pump out content so that he could get the advertising money, but that created a lot of issues because he was basically making content that he didn't really care about and put not and couldn't put that much effort into it. Because again, he does have kids. I know there's the meme about him and time. It's like, oh, time, it's his worst enemy. He hates time. Time is evil, right? But he does have two kids, and it can be hard to have to just pump out content like crazy, just to get advertisements. Like, oh, you got to show this advertisement 7 times a month in order to make this much money or whatever. And there's contracts and all that. Contracts one of the most evil things in the universe because people get signed up into the worst things and they're legally obligated to follow it. Hell, that's one of the biggest things I say about the entertainment industry. About it can be really bad about contracts. It happens to a lot of young musicians. It gets signed into a contract that ends up basically trying to ruin their life. Look at John Fogerty. There's a great example of where he based a song off one of his old songs, but because the rights were owned by the studio, he got sued for ripping off his own song. That's just goofy. Hell, what was it? Nikki Six. They were able to get a hold of their masters of their first CD, but requirements of the one of the requirements of the agreement was that he doesn't talk anything about the agreement or how he was able to get a hold of the masters. And it's like, yeah, because they don't want to know because the studios don't want anybody to know how you can get one up on them. Which God, I would love to know. I would think that if he's getting ready to die, well, never mind. I was about to say that he could just release it, but then again, they'll sue the families and stuff. There's so much insanity with that. Like, really? It's like you can sue the family. His children had nothing to do with it. Okay. Uh, or the thing is a lot of young entertainers have to deal with that, where they get signed these corrupt contracts that basically screw them over in every possible way. After a while, it's the point where it's like, again, that goes where I said the wage slavery thing. It's kind of like that. Yeah, you're just like, you're like it's like working for a circus. The old meme about having the evil circus ringmaster, the one that pays you absolutely nothing and like, abuses you and makes you do all this stuff. It's basically kind of like that. Um, God, I went off on a tangent. You know, but that's good. It goes to thing is I just don't want to be monetized because again, I probably don't always make the most family friendly content. One thing is I cuss my ass off, and another thing is I like for example, I have a meme on my channel that's based on somebody's video that is a 9/11 meme, which people will say, well, that's insensitive. It's like, yeah, but one, it's also kind of old, and two, it's kind of funny too. It's actually a pretty funny meme, and I think you can be edgy, a little bit, as long as you like as long as it's like well done and you maintain some level of reasonability. Because just throwing out like edgy for the sake of edgy is boring. Because it's like, no, make it, if you're gonna do something that's a little bit on edge, you got to be it's got to be well written. It can't just be LOL funny because bad, you know? Because it's like, be creative. Come on. If you can't be creative, then make a different punchline or something. Give me just a second. Never mind, I thought Rose had came home. Anyway, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest problems is you get that sometimes folks that just make edgy content audience. So if you have an audience that has changed, or I mean, 'cause especially like culturally, we see that like Family Guy actually made a point about this, about how when they first did the episode with Quagmire's father going through GRS, that originally they just made they made jokes about it, and Brian's throwing up because he slept with her, stuff like that, But now, of course, they made a reference later on. It's like how now they're like, oh now it's something like they're saying that, oh now it's like, well, yeah, because a lot of the culture changed, a lot of the audience has changed, their mindset, their culture, and things like that. So you do have to appeal to your audience, um, and it could be problematic if you don't think about that. Because again, culture changes over time. Because like again, we're watching I Love Lucy, and you see like a lot of it's extremely funny, but then there's also a lot of things like it does rely on a particular dynamic between men and women. Like we might say that really sexy, yeah. He wants the more traditional family roles, and there's some people nowadays that kind of want that. And of course, as long as the wife consents, as long as she agrees that that's part of what she wants. But again, one of the biggest things about the show, about the plot line, right, is that she's always trying to get involved in something else. Like she wants to be with him uh as an entertainer and things like that. And of course, there's always these schemes and things like that. Um, Again, like we watched the movie The Women, which I think is a fantastic movie. It definitely has an entirely different culture, but it's kind of like, who was saying it the other day? Oh, we were saying it in group. Different, every individual person is like dealing with a different culture. This goes back to the effectively thing. You have to you have to treat every situation based on the concept of not necessarily what's good or bad in that general sense. You have to think of it in effectively. You have goals. You pair them down to, and then you have to act effectively based on those goals. So if you have a romantic relationship with somebody, your goal is likely to maintain that relationship. So while you might have another goal that you want to accomplish, you need to act effectively towards those goals and manage them in that regard. Because if you focus on one goal and then ignore the other, well, you might end up having a problem. Like the example that gets used a lot is taking out the trash, right? Well, your significant other might forget to take out the trash, and it's been the 15th time, and you start to go your mind gets to judgments. Well, they should know. They should know that they have to do it. They should, right? And then you go up to them, and then instead of saying, I would like if you would take out the trash once you get a chance, or could you please take out the trash now, or something, or some other effective way of doing it that would maintain the relationship in an ineffective manner, and possibly yelling at them. While you might achieve the goal of having the trash taken out, you go against the goal of maintaining your relationship, because nobody likes to be yelled at for any reason. Okay, that's a generalization. Some people might like to be yelled at for certain reason here. Let me see. I'm gonna pull up Twitch so I can look at it on there, because it looks like it's been acting funny. Hmm. Yeah, it kind of is. I don't know why it's acting so funny today. Maybe I don't have good internet right now. You see, it keeps going red on OBS. I don't know. Maybe there's something else going on. Is it stream? I mean, Steam? Who knows? It could be. I have no idea. I still got to like tweak all that. Again, I'm not so great at streaming and all that, especially like I gotta, I really do need to put in more work on trying to see like different little things I can do to affect it. But yeah, as I say, like effectively. So you have to treat the way that they described it is you have to treat everybody like each particular situation as if you're encountering a different culture because you technically kind of are, because every person is an individual and they all have their little differences between them. Uh, so you might actually, so it is kind of like encountering a completely different culture. So you kind of have to treat situations like that because again, going back to the movie The Women or I Love Lucy, is that while it's America, it is much older America. Again, The Women was made in 1939. That's almost a century old. It's like close to 90 years old. So is it? Yeah, whatever. It's close to 90 years old. So it's literally almost an entirely different culture. It is so different, in fact, because it's pre World War II. There's a scene that I made a video about on my channel where someone literally says splay out on the or lay out on the bed like a swastika, which in 1939, they pretty much looked at the Nazis as like, oh, those goofy Germans. Look at them. Hey, how's it going, man? I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Yeah, because I finished my cross stitch. Let me pull it up. Where did I set it? Was this the one? Yep. So see, I finished. So I just got the third one I got to do, and then all I got to do is frame them. But yeah, 1939. Back then, when the way people looked at it, they're like, oh, those silly Nazis. They're like, Germans, you Germans are so goofy with your goofy goose stepping in your silly uniforms. They're like, ha, what crazy Germans. That's kind of how they looked at it. They're like, oh, who cares, right? Um, but of course, after World War II, we're like, holy crap, they were well, because again, a lot of countries didn't realize how bad things actually were because they could only see it from the outside, right? And again, it wasn't like the internet today where you can just type on Twitter or whatever, and people take a million pictures with their cell phones. You can only go by the information you got. So now saying something like "splay out on the bed like a swastika" and people are like, "What the hell is wrong with you? Why would you say that?" Because it's, I mean, it's old enough by this point, you can probably say it where it's like a little bit of an edgy joke, but, it got a lot more serious. Because I think a great example was after, I remember seeing an infograph about this where after World War II, before World War II, a lot of Americans tend to look at themselves as being like as being a certain descendancy, like Italian, Irish, German, etc. And most Americans before World War II identified as being German. But after World War II, most Americans identified as American. We kind of came together, especially because again they wanted to get away from their German heritage because of seeing, seeing all that stuff with Germany. Um, Back to the Future references it, where Doctor, you know, I don't know why, where he said they used to be the Von Brauns and then they changed their name, right? Um, After World War II, because again, a lot of people did things like that, you know. Um, in fact, I think, well, I mean, it probably depends on a lot of things. Oh yeah, and that's the thing. It's like you don't put people in a massive box. You put people in their own. The only box you do is you put them in their box of what you know. Because again, that's one of the things we talk about. You can't read minds. Because again, that's the thing. Even if someone seems like they belong in that box or whatever generalization you look at, it may turn out they're more complex than you think. You know, that's part of the reason why fandoms and stuff can be super fun is because it can bring people together of create strange bedfellows, as they say. Well, that's what they say about enemies too, but I don't. But let's not gather together on who we hate. Let's gather together on what we love, right? Because you can find very interesting people of different beliefs. Like one thing, especially if it's well liked by a lot of people. Let me see something. Maybe if I do this, that may be part of it. Because GIS, I don't like GIS that much because they are very large and they can take a lot of resources. Yeah, you just gotta look at people. You gotta look at people as they are individually, and that's what goes to effectively. Is you have to take that person as they are, because you have to. There's a technique called check the facts. So look at a relationship. You can literally have had 5 relationships in total, and the past 4 relationships cheated on you. That doesn't mean you need to treat the fifth one as if they're going to cheat on you. Reasonable, um, reasonable protections are fine, but you don't need to automatically treat it that way, because what's going to happen is it's going to damage the relationship, and then you end up creating. I think what's her name? There's a comedian lady Taylor or something. I can't remember her last name. The what her therapist told her is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Let's see. To cure racism or rather lack of cultural difference is just by spending some time with someone on the other side of the fence. Yeah, that's one of the best things is engage with people that you disagree with, and don't hate them for those disagreements. Listen to them and try to understand. You don't have to agree with it to understand it. That's one of the things I learned, because again, I'm not religious in any way. Um, and while there was a time that I would have been on the atheist side of things or whatever, I didn't stay there very long, because a lot of atheism is, I'm not gonna say a lot. That goes back into that generalization, but there's a lot of very loud and angry atheists out there, like the amazing atheist, right? Um, and they're very loud and angry. In fact, I actually had somebody one time, not too long ago on Reddit, say that how religion was for idiots or something like that, that it was just made to manipulate people. And I'm like, I mean, some religions, sure. I mean, a lot of things are made to manipulate people. People in power manipulate people, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure there are plenty examples of, I mean, well, there's cults, right? We know cults exist, but basically he's treating all religions as cults. And I'm like, does that include all religions? And he's pretty much like, yeah. And I'm like, including, and of course this is like a gotcha thing, and it's a little bit of a dick move, but I was like, so including Judaism? And he's like, did I stutter? And then of course then he blocked me because he kind of realized what he said, and it's like, no, people are allowed to believe what they believe. You can have disagreements about those beliefs, and that's fine. You can say, I don't agree with that. But to say that all these people that belong to this religion is there's something wrong with them. It's like, there's not. People allowed to believe whatever they believe, because it's based on their knowledge, experience, and circumstances. Most of that which you can't control. You can control your knowledge to some degree, but you also have to be exposed to that knowledge, or have the ability to find it or understand it, which we're learning a lot now from neurodivergence. People who are on the autism spectrum, people who have ADHD, um, OCD, and things like that might have trouble processing certain types of information. Dyslexia too. What is it? Well, I'll say this like this, because I generally consider myself a nihilist. Actually, is that nihilism can be very unhealthy to some people, because they let it devolve into like this sort of hatred thing, right? Or this sort of apathy for existence, right? But I think the best thing about it is if you look at it from a more positive side. Like, don't be like when you look at it as like, I'm free to exist, right? I don't have to worry about this set, which this kind of goes into some heavy stuff, but I like to go, where I like to look at it as, I'm free to exist. You know, I look at it like, because there's no I like to say that because there's no objective thing sitting in the metaphysical that tells me this, that, and the other, then when I say, hey, this, no, I, because it's easy for a lot of people to look at it like this bad thing happening, and they say, well, if this bad thing happens, God can't exist or whatever, right? But it's like, but that's because you are already judging it as a bad thing. I think that's part of the problem, is that with atheism is that there's a lot of the morality stuff is there. There's a lot of, and it's usually kind of basic morality based on what their region, culture, all that kind of stuff is. But then it just lacks the God aspect of it, right? And again, there's a lot of angry stuff. Whereas I say, hey, be like, the perfect example is the movie The Big Lebowski, right? Some people have said that movie is actually a perfect example of different forms of nihilism, right? Whereas Jeffrey Lebowski, the dude, he's more of an apathetic nihilist. He just kind of lives his life. The dude abides, right? Uh, what is it? Yeah, exactly. It's like just be like, hey, nothing. Hey, it's like, hey, this bad thing happened to me. Okay, is to try to say, well, it's not because of an inherent thing that's this or inherent that. It's because of these things that happened. But I also like to look at it as is that my perception is subjective. So, am I really am I really like how much do I actually know? Like I don't know you truly you don't know outside of your own perception, right? So I'll say it like this: my perception is as subjective as anything else. So I like to say this, do I really exist or am I just a collective consciousness? Like, because again, we can only perceive our own consciousness. We judge that some animals like dolphins and stuff like that have consciousness and intelligence, but we don't have any way of perceiving that. Just like we don't have the ability to perceive by reading other people's minds. So truly, it's, look at the Matrix, right? It's kind of like the Matrix. You look at it, you don't know who, like, are they all human or who might be the robots and or agents and stuff like that. Like, what's really real, right? And it's not to say, well, nothing's real. Let me just go shoot heroin in an alleyway and die, right? I mean, maybe I could do that, but if I do that, that's my own choice, right? I'm choosing that. I take responsibility for that. Instead of saying, well, I had no choice, like with my history of dealing with abuse and things like that. I could say, well, I react this way to this stuff because that's how my parents treated me. Or I could say, well, I react this way and my parents treated me like that, but my own perception of it, my own idiosyncrasies, etc. Some people have tried to say that it's kind of like existentialism, but I also point out like, well, existentialism can also be more objective, where I feel more subjective about it. Yeah, The Big Lebowski is so great. Yeah, collective consciousness. Because I say, what if all the cells in our body that are living, what if they have a form of consciousness? And what if that consciousness collectively, because of our subjective perceptions, our sight, sound, all that kind of stuff, makes us hallucinate that we have individuality. Or it could be like we're the cells, right, in a massive collective consciousness of the universe or something. We perceive ourselves individually, but the universe is actually an entity with its own consciousness that we can't perceive. And that gets into like that super extra, like someone's been dropping shrooms or whatever thing, but it's actually not it's an interesting thing to consider. I've never done shrooms. In fact, I don't do drugs at all. I've taken some THC gummies, but I've only done it every once in a while because I've smoked a little weed as well, but it's it doesn't work that well with my head. I think way too fast, and so if I do that, my thoughts go faster than I can catch up with, and I don't really particularly like it. If it was like super mega ultra mild, I might be okay with it, but I just don't do drugs just because, and I definitely don't do anything that would hype me up like cocaine, crystal meth, or anything like that. One, I don't want to spend the money. Two, I don't need anything that hypes me up. That would be terrible because I already have the things with the manic and the depressive. So if I get in a manic mood and I were to take something like cocaine, it'd be like the Tasmanian devil. I tell people they'd have to get those like creature catchers, like the one with the loop that you hook around their neck. Yeah. So I think that's one of the things that I use it for is I say, hey, you know, you know, I don't know. Yeah, that's just kind of the way I do it. So I can use I use that to make it easier for me to both for acceptance, right? I try to use that to for acceptance, so I can say it is, but it also only is because I perceive it that way. I could just as easily say that it's not real because our memories are fallible. As someone said, our memories are just us remembering our memories, right? Because again, I had a great uh yeah, I think that's true too. That it's easy for us to look at consciousness in kind of a vague way. And again, it could just as easily be like sort of a agnostic thing where, because again, there are actually theistic nihilists too that say, hey, there is a God. I like to use the Ecclesiastes. There's a great, I can't grab my phone. Where is it? Well, there, yeah, there's like part in Ecclesiastes where it's at the beginning of it. I think it's Ecclesiastes 1 9 through 14, where he basically says, hey, there's nothing new under the sun. And everything is just, it is, and then it ends. You know, it might happen again, but, he says basically it's meaning, that basically everything is essentially meaningless. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how it is. It's like, yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. Look at that. Humans have been having wars since before we were anywhere near our level of intricacy, right? We've been having wars. Of course, that goes to the theories of why there are no longer Neanderthals. A combination of wars and possibly interbreeding and things like that. You know, that's the two things, fighting and sex, right? That's been universal. A great example is Pompeii. Pompeii got completely destroyed, but the great thing about it is how much stuff it preserved. Like a lot of graffiti, you know, would get cleaned up just the same way it does here. So if someone writes blank's mom as a blank, right, that's going to get cleaned up. And that happened too. But Pompeii preserved a lot of that. So, as they've uncovered it, they found stuff like someone says blank is a whore and stuff like that. It's very funny because it goes to show you that no matter what, we've pretty much been the same kind of corrupt creatures as we've always been. The good thing is our knowledge about psychology and stuff like that helps us deconstruct a lot of this in hopes that a lot of us can understand it better, and try to be more effective. At least try to create a culture that lives more effectively. That's what I would hope anyway. Because again, I mean, we can all admit that wars are probably gonna always exist. There's no such thing as world. There's no true thing as world peace. There's always going to be that conflict, right? That human conflict. But about trying to find ways to be more effective about it. Of course, we have things like the Hague and the Geneva Conventions and all that, in hopes to try to be more fair about it, more reasonable about doing it. Where if we're going to at least, let's see, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, that thing, yeah, that was it like like I remember what was it? There's like one like super old like a tablet or whatever that had been chiseled onto, and it was a return receipt because the like steel was like the wrong quality or something like that, and it's like, he's like we've pretty much always been the same. We just have different technology, right? It goes to that nothing new under the sun. That's what I tell people. It's like you give was it there's a video of like a big chimpanzee, or is it chimpanzee or orangutan? I think that's what it was. And he's like using a saw, You teach him how to use a saw, he's gonna use a saw, you know. And give it like 10,000 years and maybe monkeys they'll have built houses and stuff like that. Apes, actually, those are apes, but whatever. It's very fun, you know. But of course, the thing is that even with all this stuff, we have to kind of like live our lives and try to be as effective as possible, you know, and hope that in general we can find, because again, like I said, you can be nihilistic but still hope, right? Because you say, well, hope is mine. It's my own expression, and I do it because I do, right? And I want to feel that, and that's the thing. I just like for the freedom of it, right? Of being of trying to like free yourself from like this objective meta concept, right? It makes it can make things a lot easier to deal with. When you say, well, I don't objectively have to be anything, like where I don't have to be this, I have to be that. I can be essentially whatever I want to be. And I think that's kind of, I haven't read any of Nietzsche's stuff, to be honest. Um, I've just kind of read the meta commentary on that kind of stuff because I don't really I don't know. I think that he also had kind of the thing where there's a lot of it was depressing and things like that. But see, of course, the funny thing is that just the same as I can use it in a positive sense, there are other people that might use it in a negative sense because again, he was against anti-Semitism and other things like that. Because he's like, well, you're not doing it because of any objective reason. You're doing it because you're doing it. It's part of, you're choosing to, right? And then that's kind of something that the Nazis latched onto was anti-Semitism, and he's all like, "Ah, shit." um, you know, the reason you want to be better is the reason. Basically, hold on. The reason you want to be better. Hold on. I have to think about that one. The reason you want to be better is the reason you aren't. Is he kind of saying that when you look at it like, oh, I want to be better, but, and that but is what's stopping you? Because one of the things we talk about in DBT in judgments is getting rid of the word but. When you say a statement, if you put a but on it, that but contradicts the first part of the statement. So instead, rewrite it to use the word and. And if it doesn't make any sense, you might need to rewrite it because it's a judgment, right? So an example is you might say to your significant other, "I love you, but don't say but don't say that, right?" What you instead say is, "I love you, and I would appreciate if you did this," because then you're validating them with the "I love you" part, and you're requesting something. Whereas if you say, "I love you, but I would appreciate if you did this," that's saying that this thing is affecting that, is getting in the way of you loving them. Oh, yeah, yeah. You're always kind of like putting yourself in a position where it's like, well, I need more. It's like, well, I want money. People are like that with money. It's like, well, I would be happy, but I don't have enough money. It's like, well, do you really need money to be happy? Now, don't get me wrong. We do live in a society. We live in a society, right? We do need money because you can't take a bundle of corn and take it to your power bill to pay your power bill, right? You need money just because it's an effective way to participate in the economy. Obviously, you need money, but um, at the same time, it's easy to. What time is it? 12. Okay, I just want to look at the time. But at the same time, it's easy to look at it like that's exactly it. We need enough money to where we can be functional, right? I'm gonna change the tag to just chatting because it needs to be like that. So yeah, we need enough money to survive, right? Um, because of course, if you're dead, you can't really improve if you're dead. Well, then again, for some people that might be an improvement, which sounds really messed up. But let's be honest, there's some individuals out there that have lived lives that create issues for the fact that they exist. Look at people like this is Charles Manson, right? Oh, Jolly Charlie, that's what Paul called him, or Curtis called him. Paul said it, but Curtis was the one saying it. Yeah, I remember reading the story about how he was in prison, when he was much younger, and they were like, "Okay, your sentence is done. You got to go." And he's like, "I don't want to go. I want to stay in prison." And they're like, "Nah, you got to go." And then of course all that bad stuff happens, right? And it's like, yeah, there's some individuals that maybe the most effective thing is not. Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like I myself, I'm not a greedy person. Now, if they like, hey, if you do this extra bit of work, you'll make extra money. I'll say, yeah, sure. I want to make as much money as reasonably possible without having to commit anything illegal or unethical. Because it's not worth it to go through all that. Because greed sucks. Like, you see these YouTubers and stuff like that, and they make millions of dollars. They live in a $3 million house, and I'm like, I couldn't do that. Sorry. I'd just be bored walking through the house. Like seriously. I don't even know if I want a two-story house. One story is just fine with me. I wouldn't mind a decent sized piece of land because I can, do stuff around on it, but I just want enough to carry my stuff. That's what George Carlin said. A house is a place for your stuff. So I need enough place for stuff and enough place to do stuff that combination, right? Yeah, I don't want to be a millionaire. That would suck. Especially because, like I said, if you do make a lot of money, a lot of your money does get taken in taxes. And I'll also be the guy to be like, yeah, I don't trust the government to use my money. They'll use to line their pockets and to line the pockets of their allies, but they're not going to use it for anything good. Because it's like, yeah, we have people starving to death in the streets, and then they, bail out the freaking auto industry so they can continue to make bad cars. Which I'm very impassioned about cars too. So, oh, I can't. I'll be the mean guy and say I can't stand American cars. Again, I used to be a mechanic, so I can't stand having to work on them. Again, that's why I try to almost exclusively have Japanese cars. Yeah, it's like you get that huge house, you have to hire a maid. You can't, you would literally have to spend all day because I mean, even with our small apartment, like it's a little bit of a mess. You can see I've got my water jugs over there because the city I live in, the water from the faucets is terrible because the pipes are all old. They break all the time. And it wasn't that long ago we had massive flooding issues that were causing the water pumps to fail for the water treatment plant, and the water's coming out brown. Um, but it's also an old city, and we have almost nobody, and not many people live here, and the economy is extremely slow. So it's like they don't even have money anyway. I tell people it would take both money and decades of work to be able to fix the water problems. So I just get it delivered and get it through there. But yeah, it takes so much time just to clean a house. Again, that's why back in the day, you would have the stay-at-home wife typically, she would stay home, raise the kids, clean the house and cook and all that while the husband did the 9 to 5 or whatever job. Yeah, it's like, yeah, if you have like even if you have one rug, yeah, vacuuming it may not take very long, but then you might have to do other parts of cleaning it, clean up stains, things like that. You really need to pick it up and sweep underneath it because there's going to be dirt that goes through it. You got hardwood floors. You really got to clean them very well. Um, what is it? Cleaning your walls. A lot of people don't do stuff like that. The walls of the ceiling or their ceiling fan. Like you look at a ceiling, you go to somebody's house that has a ceiling fan, and that thing has got a layer of just dust on it, right? How you get a lot of folks don't replace their air filter for their central AC, which I have one, and I need to clean it because the grate's getting dirty right now. So I say again, don't judge it. We're about to go on a trip, so I'm not bothered right now, but I do need to get a new air filter for it, which takes a weird size. So, but yeah, it's a lot of effort to clean. It really is. Like we've got some things like a dishwasher, which modern invention that can help reduce the burden, but it's not going to fix it. Like even with the Roomba's okay, but it's not going to replace like getting great vacuum cleaner and actually vacuuming it and sweeping underneath it, things like that. It can only do so much. Same thing like washing, like with the washing dishes. Even then, they fail, and there's certain things that cannot be put in a dishwasher because it will destroy it. Like I accidentally put Rose's percolator in there, and it has a finish on it that it ruined because I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that. And same thing like with an iron skillet. No, you need to clean that properly, or else you're going to ruin it. It takes a lot of effort. And so like having this massive multi-story mansion, like what do you need? Especially because like you get people like was I think it was H3 or whatever, like that came out, they had like a multi-million-dollar mansion, and it's like you're two people with one kid. Why do you need all that space for? What are you doing there? Because I mean, you see what their thing is. I mean, maybe they have a studio in there, but it's not like they do like skits and stuff like that. It's like a podcast basically. So what do they need all that space for? Maybe they want it. I'm not going to criticize somebody who chooses to live whatever life, but I'm going to say that I definitely wouldn't want that. That's for sure. Like I don't want a Mercedes either. I just want a car that's got the features I need, which I don't even care that much for parking sensors, but now that I have that Pilot that has them, I like, yeah, it's okay. But I definitely want a backup camera, and I wish it had like a push button start and stuff like that. But like remote start, and a lot of this other random stuff that comes with these cars, I don't really need. I don't even particularly want Bluetooth because Bluetooth is really slow to connect. I'd rather just have the physical auxiliary connection. But it's like, yeah, there's a lot of that where it's like but, right? They say, I want to do this, but, and there's a lot of but in there, but again, right? One of the things that they teach us is check the facts, which is to say, What you do is, excuse me, we check, like I said, we check the facts. You know, what you, damn it, with check the facts, what you do is you you look at the objective facts of the situation. Like, get away from the subjective, get away from the judgments. Look at it objectively, and deconstruct that. And while I'll be the first person to argue about the difference between want and need, because some people say, well, why do you, well, you don't really need that, you want that. And I'm like, that's not necessarily how the word need works. Need doesn't necessarily mean need it to survive, because technically we don't even need to survive, because if you die, it's not like the world's going to collapse in on itself because you needed to exist. Let's be honest. So you don't technically need food because you don't need to be alive. But if people, because I find it just such a weird argument. Maybe not weird, but I feel like it's fallacious in some degree. Fallacious. I you know what I mean. It's not more like a logical fallacy. But if you're talking about in terms of goals, you might need something for that. So, like, if I want to be a parent, I need a child because you can't be a parent without a child. It's that simple. Oh yeah. So you have a goal. So if you have a goal and something is required for that goal, it's a need, even if it's not a need to survive. Because there's a lot of things you don't need a house to survive. You really don't even. I mean, again, we used to live in caves and stuff. So it's like you could really go out and live in nature, if you really wanted to. You'd be some, Grizzly Adams or whatever. Is that I don't know. You could, go out, be like Bear Grylls. There we go. That's a more modern reference there. You could be like Bear Grylls and go and live out in the wild and drink your pee and all that kind of stuff. Need, right? So the truth is, like let's not worry about arguing about what people need and saying that you don't need that, you just want that. Like that's unimportant, right? It's irrelevant to the whole discussion. And so that's the thing. I would say, why do they need that? Sure, I mean, maybe they want that. Okay, that's fine. Just like I don't necessarily criticize. Like I will, I'll criticize the elites, the politicians, the wealthy, the corporations, and stuff like that. But also at the same time, I don't hate Elon Musk because he's wealthy. I just don't like his cars or really anything he does. He's a good businessman though. That's why he's so rich. But and of course, people have their thing about Twitter, but I also don't like Twitter. So, like, I tried to use it like a couple of times in the past. I think I've 3 different times tried to use it, and just after a couple of posts, I just was like, I don't like this. I just don't use Twitter. I don't like it. So it's like, yeah, if Twitter failed, I wouldn't be too much bothered because I just don't use it anyway. So it has nothing to do with like morality or politics. It's just I don't. Again, I worked for Tesla for a while, and I couldn't stand it. They didn't treat me very well, so it wasn't worth it to stay there. The pay and benefits were amazing, but the way they treated me was terrible, and I didn't like it. But I also have my own specific. I could go off for hours and explain my problems with the Tesla car company, which is not anything about EVs. Like, I like the idea of new technology, but I actually prefer hydrogen vehicles over electric vehicles, hydrogen electric vehicles over battery electric vehicles, because I don't think the technology's there. But the problem is that there's no infrastructure for hydrogen right now, and you pretty much can only buy them in California and Oregon. I wish you could get a Mirai over here, because I'd probably own one in a heartbeat if I felt like paying that much. But there's no infrastructure for it. And one of the things I will praise Tesla for is building their own infrastructure. Of course, it uses a proprietary connector because, of course, right? They want to be Apple of the car world, and that's one of the things I don't like about them, because Apple is so corrupt in so many ways. Lewis Rossman has all these videos where he criticizes the way Apple is. And Tesla, a lot of these arguments pretty much works for Tesla too. But that being that as it may, I don't hate Elon Musk for being rich. I mean, he's allowed to be whatever. I mean, unless he got that money through like literal slavery or straight up stealing it from people. I mean, I know people talk about exploitation and all that, but there's a fine line between a lot of that. You said, was it Jay Aubrey? I'm gonna mark that down so I can remember that. Yeah, I think what's that guy's name? Thunderfoot or something? He did a lot of great videos on that. I think that's the guy's name. Thunderfoot? I think he's like a I think he's British and he's like I think he's like an engineer or something. I'm not 100% sure because I don't watch a lot of his stuff, but he did a lot of good videos on Tesla and Elon Musk in general, like the Hyperloop thing, one of the most hilariously bad ideas ever. And it's because Elon Musk is not an engineer; he's a business guy. He's like the '80s guy from Futurama, you know. He's like that. Only he's actually and he's as successful as that guy. He just doesn't have bonitis. Maybe he will one day. And admittedly, he's a little wonky, and he does claim to have been diagnosed with Asperger's, so he's on the autism spectrum. Because we're supposed to go away from definitions like Asperger's syndrome, because that puts people again that goes to putting people in a box, and you just call it the autism spectrum disorder because it again is it's a spectrum. And I'm like, yeah, he probably does because he has some indicators. He's a little, weird because I'm a little weird. So and I'm on the autism spectrum. So that I'm not gonna hate him for that. Although I have seen people do that, and I'm like, don't do that. What was it? I think there's that time when those guys, what was it those Gonzo journalists? Are they called? Would they be called Gonzo? What's the Veritas guys or whatever? Where they had people like pretending to like date the people of Tesla of Twitter, like and like one of the guys was like mocking Elon for being on the autism spectrum, and I'm like, dude, you can disagree with his politics, the way he runs his business, this, that, or the other, but don't do that. That's just a jerk move. Like, what? Don't do that. It's such a crude thing to do. Like, come on. It's like a great example right now going on right now. Ben Shapiro. He is kind of a jerk, big time. He's a great debater, but he is a jerk a lot of the times, right? And he's very loud and loves attention. But imagine if I jump down and I'm like, well, I'm going to criticize, I'm going to criticize his heritage, you know, or criticize the fact that he's Jewish, and I'm like, no, that's fucked up. That has nothing to do with him being a jerk. He's just a jerk on his own, right? Oh yeah, oh yeah, big time. The South African apartheid and stuff like that. You know, yeah, it's like yeah, criticize people for the factors about them, right? Now, it's one thing if you want to make fun. Like I like to make fun of Biden all the time because he's easy to make fun of, right? The whole, the stuff like that. But I'm not going to sit there and say that there's something. I like to make fun, and making fun is one thing, but another thing is to be like, you know, granted he is a little bit on the old side, and he might. I wouldn't say he's dysfunctional, but he does have a lot of suspect moments. But as far as I know, I don't know if he's been diagnosed with anything that would say that he has dysfunction, and to criticize him on that, because again, back to take it back with Trump, right? They try to say, oh well, Trump has dementia. They try to say, oh he's this, so he's unfit to be president. It's like, well, all those work for Biden too, because they're both very old men. Let's be honest, Trump is what 78, something like that. They're both very old men. So like, yeah, they're both going to be a little wonky in terms of mental clarity, you know. Now, granted, someone like Bernie Sanders is pretty sharp for his age. Last time I saw him, which I got to give him that, he's very sharp for his age. But also at the same time, they are also older men, and things get a little bit more difficult as you get older, And I'm not going to criticize them for their age, you know, or say that their age makes them incompetent, you know. And again, as far as we know, there's no diagnosis on any aspect. Again, people will say that they'll say, well, because of this, that. A great example that goes to check the facts. Some people say this when it comes to politicians. Well, this guy has this because of this part of how they act or what they say. And I say, well, here's the thing is there's a reason why diagnosis happens in a clinical setting is that you have to have a professional in a clinical setting where someone usually has a private, what do you call it? Private diagnostic, or whatever you want to call it, a private session. That's the word I'm looking for. A private session where the person has to be willing to at least be open enough
for them to be able to diagnose them. You can't do it by someone's public, by the way someone acts in public, because the way some people might say the way I act in public, a lot of people will say I don't have a stutter. I took speech for years because I had a stutter, which in retrospect is probably from being on the spectrum. And a lot of people say, "You have a stutter?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do. Get me in the right moment, you'll hear me stutter." And that's because I've learned since then to think about what I say before I say it, to the point that I can think fast enough to improvise so much dialogue pretty easily. So it seems like I don't have a stutter, but it's because I've practiced for so long. So you can't take the public perception of me and say, well, this is how you are. Just like that's one of the things, is learning to be able to make eye contact is really hard, because it's kind of a bother to me, but I've gotten so much better at it to where you might not be able to tell I'm on the spectrum, depending on what moment you might see me in, right? And that's because it's a facade. Just like my customer service, the way I am with customer service, it's a facade. So you can't say that this is objectively who I am, because this is just how you see me in one light, where I'm having to pretend to be somebody. And that's true of a lot of celebrities. You really don't know how they are, because you're just going on what you see. And that goes to about the fallibility of perception, and why checking the facts and reminding yourself that you can't read someone's mind. You know, Now it's easy to like worry yourself about what someone might actually be like, but that's why of course it's important to try to push that away. Again, it goes to that parasocial relationship thing I've mentioned before. You know, like okay, let's take conversation with Curtis, right? With like Paul. Um, I don't know like much about like particularly Paul's, like, let's say, political beliefs, right? I would say that he's probably at least left leaning, right? Because he lives in Seattle, Washington, and that's a pretty left leaning place, just like California is. That whole coast is generally left leaning. I'm from the deep South, where in general, politics are generally pretty far right. Even the parts that are more left leaning still have a lot of right leaning aspects about it, right? I don't remember. I've heard that before, but I don't know if they made us do that. For me, I think it was. Well, I say for years. I know for a fact it was at least 2 years. It may have been more. I went through speech therapy, but again, where I am, education doesn't get a whole lot of money. So, but ultimately, I learned. It's at least 2 years. It may have been more, but I just can't remember that much. Um, that does sound really familiar, though. I've heard that somewhere, if not from that. But yeah, so back to what I was saying, is like Paul and me might disagree heavily on politics, right? But I don't know that, and it really wouldn't be effective for us to discuss it. I don't think he would be unreasonable. I think it's something that we could easily discuss in a very respectful setting, because again, I'm sure he respects me and I respect him. But also it's like it doesn't really matter that much, because why discuss it? It would have nothing to do with anything that we would talk about, right? Uh, so again, it wouldn't really matter. And so rather than worry about it, I could just check the facts and say, maybe he's like this, maybe he's not. I don't know, but it doesn't really matter, and let it go. But that's the thing, is that there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of divisiveness in terms of like politics and personal beliefs that goes on. And so you get a lot of people that do worry a lot about that, and they sort of put people in the boxes like we were talking about. They say, well, if you vote for this person, you're this, or if you vote for this person, you're like, they say, if you vote for this person, you're an idiot. If you vote for this person, you're an idiot, or whatever, whatever. And it's like, no, they probably had their own reasons for voting for them. I actually had a friend one time, because of the way they voted and the way things had been going, they actually apologized to me. And I was like, no, 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 no. You don't have to apologize to me. I completely understand. That's your choice. That's your freedom. That's your right. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're allowed to do that. That doesn't make you a bad person for following your beliefs or doing your wants and desires, all that kind of stuff. Like, you don't have to apologize to me. It's cool for someone to say, hey, you were right. but but it goes back to that but, right? It's cool for someone to say that I'm right, and I want to make sure that they feel validated that you're allowed to have that. You're allowed to have that belief. You're allowed to have that disagreement. Because again, there's other things that I disagree with them on for sure, and I know I do. And if I don't think it'd be effective to discuss, I just leave it alone. It doesn't matter. That's of course why things like Reddit and stuff like that can be so frustrating because there's a lot of well actually posts. There's a lot of times you say something and someone wants to come in well actually, or a lot of people that want to argue, and I'm like, can we just be effective at least? Like, if you want to disagree with me, that's cool. Like, just let's be effective about it. And some individuals cannot. They want to go straight into the insults or things like that, and I'm like, no, no, thank you. I usually have just responded by just saying, you just want to troll? Goodbye. And if they keep going, I just block them because it's like, mm. And they can, of course, be proud of me blocking them, but I'm like, ugh. Oh yeah, see that's the best thing is being open to being wrong because you can always change, right? Um, and to say that I agreed with this thing, I agree with that thing, and you would say, huh, you believe because they can change all the time due to different things. I like to say the two primary ways that people change. I say primary because we're supposed to stay away from black and white thinking. Is either some big event happens that changes the way you see things, or slowly over time. Those are the two main ways, but a lot of things can affect it. And you know, that's the best thing is to say that sometimes you might be wrong, or to give a chance for you to be wrong and try something that you think won't work or something like that. You know, like for example, at work, they didn't want us to use a delivery service because they felt like that we were spending too much money on it. I was like, we're not spending too much money on it. We're spending the perfect amount of money on it. Um, because we were charging the customers too, so it's not like we were losing money. We weren't overcharging them. We were charging them the exact amount because we didn't want to. We do a lot of insurance jobs, so charging them extra would hurt their profits, and it would just, and I want to help them as much as I want to make money off them, right? But they didn't want us to use the delivery service. They felt like we were using too much. We were spending too much money. But it's like, guys, I work for an obscure brand, so a lot of our customers are not within the area. We have, and they need these parts. Otherwise, we're telling them to go get it from somebody else. Don't spend $5,000 with us. Spend it with them. We don't want your money. It's like, no, I would like their money. It's like, and especially because we're not ripping them off. I want. So they were like, hey, why don't you guys just deliver it yourself instead? And we're like, this is why we want to do it that way. And I said, and so finally I was like, okay, let's try it. After doing it 3 times and them having to pay for my gas because I used my own vehicle, they said, stop doing it. And I'm like, you see? Because you're not paying for the gas, you're not paying for the mileage of their vehicle, you're paying for the space on their truck. Because they're already going there, you're paying for the space on the truck. And that's why it's so much cheaper than doing it yourself. Because doing it yourself will cost 2 to 3 times as much, especially if you're paying mileage. Because I think federal for mileage is like 41 cents a mile. And when you have to drive 200 miles, you suddenly start finding yourself paying hundreds of dollars to deliver one part. Yeah, that's one of the things is I love seeing different arguments from people, um, and looking at them and analyzing them. Both as how can I reconcile what my experiences and knowledge and circumstances with their experience, knowledge, and circumstances to create that. Like someone actually, because we were talking about like guns and stuff like that, right? And someone said, well, this involving the history of guns. And I was like, really? I was like, where do you? I was like, where? I didn't say it in a way that was like doubting them. I was like, where did you get that information? And then they told me about a book, and I was like, oh, cool. So I have it on my Amazon wish list because stuff like that is like I want to read that book. I've got other books and other forms of information that support my viewpoint, but I want to read that book too and to see it and then look, deconstruct it and see that because I'm curious. Because the truth is, most things are actually gray. It's not. Most things are not black and white. It's usually gray. Again, what is it? It's again just like every human. You can be a victim and a victimizer at the same time. So people can have sympathy for you and anger at the things you've done. Look at Michael Jackson.
He was abused as a child. He was groomed into being an entertainer, right? He made amazing music. He's a fantastic musician. He is a victim of severe child abuse and grooming by the, entertainment industry, right? Now, because he hasn't been convicted, there's no proof he did anything to any of these kids other than the fact that he was really weird around them. Like Corey Feldman claims he didn't do anything to him untoward except for stuff that might cross boundaries involving like how weird he was and some of his tastes with certain things. But in general, there's no proof that he straight up did anything to these children that was extreme, right? Because he hasn't been convicted. I think there was recently that documentary, but I don't have much interest in watching that thing, because again, he's not here to defend himself anymore. And great way to make money, right, is to talk shit about a dead person. But um, you know, we don't have any objective proof that he did that. So, but he could have. Again, we don't have clairvoyance, so we don't have any way to say definitely not. We just have no proof of it. So there's reasonable doubt, right? But he could easily, just as easily, be a victimizer as he was a victim, and his victimization may have contributed to him committing this act against people. That doesn't justify it. It just becomes the reasons for it. But he can be both. So you can like his art, you can have sympathy for how he's victimized, but also hatred for the things that he did. Maybe not hatred because that's too much. Hatred, of course, can often lead to ineffective behaviors, but you can disagree with, and you can disagree morally with what he did. Hell, the great example I like to use, like we were talking about this with art, Adolf Hitler was an artist, and he's actually a pretty good artist for the most part. Like his building paintings are actually really good. Of course, he wasn't allowed in the art school, and history is history, right? I don't want to have a picture of it up on my wall because I don't like landscapes or that kind of painting particularly. But if I was into that, I'd be like, hey, this is a good painting. And I shouldn't have to be like, man, he did something horrible. One of the most evil things ever. I'm not allowed to like a painting by him. It's like, to me, I don't agree with that. I'm allowed to like his painting. He can make a good painting and still be crazy. What's his name? John Wayne Gacy? The clown guy? He made clown paintings. Heck, great example. John Hinckley. Back in the day was crazy as a sack of cats because he tried to shoot up the president. Now he makes music on YouTube because now he's been released and stuff like that. It's like I'm allowed to enjoy his music without being some sort of psychopath, and I can still disavow like the actions that he did, and still say, hey, I might like this song of his. His music's okay. You know, so that's the thing that they teach us in DBT is that two contradictory things can exist at the same time in you. Like a woman can like the way she looks, but also want to change the way she looks. Some people might say, though, one of the biggest fallacies is too cocaine, or too coke. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Again, I've seen it written everywhere, but I've never heard anyone say it. Is the hypocrite fallacy? Just because something makes you a hypocrite doesn't make it wrong. But the thing is that hypocrisy is more about our perception of it. Oh yeah, H.P. Lovecraft. There's a great meme about the name of his cat, or at least the name of a cat in one of his books. Or I can't remember if it's his actual cat or his cat has a name. And if you just type in H.P. Lovecraft cat, you'll be like, oh God, yeah, no, right. But that was not uncommon back then. Because if you've ever seen the Dam Busters, this goes back to me talking about Star Wars. The Star Wars took some of its cinematic inspiration from the Dam Busters, particularly the Death Star trench scene, right? Well, the Dam Busters is based on real life. They had a dog, and the dog had a name similar to H.P. Lovecraft cat. In the movie Dam Busters, they call the dog by its name to one point where one of the guy gets off the plane and he shouts the name, and it's like, ugh. It's I shouldn't be smiling because it's not. Well, it's funny. Let's be honest. It's funny. It's edgy funny, but it's funny because it shows you how much society has changed in a relatively short period of time. That back then it's like, oh yeah, just call them that. That's fine. But then nowadays it's like no one would even get even close to that. But yeah, It's like, but just because of that, I can still enjoy the movie. Hell, two movies that have been preserved by our government under of like important films is Triumph of the Will and Birth of a Nation. Both are propaganda films. Birth of a Nation was a KKK propaganda film, and Triumph of the Will was a Nazi propaganda film. But both of them pioneered movie making, developed new techniques and things like that that revolutionized it. And so they're very, very important for the culture of movies. Triumph of the Will also helped inspire some of Star Wars cinematography too. So it's like, yeah, if Triumph of the Will didn't exist, then some aspects of Star Wars wouldn't exist. That's not to say to watch it and, well, I think the biggest thing is like, you know, I think I remember somebody I knew, and this was sus as hell that they had Birth of a Nation on DVD. I didn't know their father, but it was really sus that they had it on DVD. Because I'm like, would you really want to have it on DVD and watch it more than once? I tried watching it. Like after about 30 minutes in, it is boring as hell. So I was like, yeah, I'm done here. I gave it a chance. Hey, I gave Thor two chances. The first Thor movie, I gave it two chances and got so bored. I kept falling asleep, so I just stopped trying. But, you know, again, instead of looking at it black and white, let's look at it in gray, in terms of gray, you know, and say, hey, this thing can have this bad thing, this thing has a good thing, just like each of us. When people like to go into like this moral high ground, this righteous indignation, I sometimes like to ask people the question, what's the worst thing you've ever done in your life? And I don't just mean what's the worst thing that other people would judge you for. What have you done that you consider so bad that you are ashamed to even say it? Because all of us have bad things we've done in our lives. I know I've done some bad things and I feel ashamed for them. And of course, I've worked to both correct my own guilt because guilt is extremely destructive, but also to try to make amends with those people, um, and things like that. And luckily it's all cool now, for the most part. Some of the people I've wronged, I don't have any contact with anymore, but sometimes it might be for the best because it depends on the level of what it is, you know. And so, like, well, I'll give a great example because I am a victim of child abuse and things like that. Some of that abuse spilled onto to my sister, where I was probably, I'm not gonna say probably, where I was, you know, mean and angry and hurtful towards her. But me and her are cool, because again, she had to suffer the exact same thing, right? And so she knows that it's not a case of me, you know, well, she knows, and me and her never really had a negative relationship. I mean, maybe sometimes, yeah, but not really. Hell, she's more fair to our parents than I am. She gives them a lot more credit than I do. I just don't deal with them. And so I can feel guilt for that, and I can say that that was a bad thing, but I can also look at the reasons why that happened, so I can both be that and then this. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Yeah, it's like it's good to preserve it for historical sake, but then leave it at that, right? You know, like again, you get the another example is Mein Kampf. It's and the Communist Manifesto and other stuff like that. We preserve them for historical things, and if someone wants to read it, then let them read it. But I will also say that I don't think anyone who reads it would be at risk of going that far unless they already had some predisposition towards that ideology. That's not to say that people can't be influenced negatively and groomed and other things like that. Absolutely. Again, American History X talks about that, how people can be groomed into it, especially if they do have to deal with trauma and other circumstances. But at the same time, people that are predisposed to that, you know, I've never read it. I've read the Communist Manifesto though, and I'm not a communist, but I also I feel like I could read Mein Kampf and be like, well, that was interesting. Read it from a historical context instead of looking at it as like, hey, this is me now. Ha ha ha. Where's my SS uniform? My water just splashed in my face. Although, let's be honest, Hugo Boss does know how to make a uniform. But too bad that it's attached to one of the ultimate evils. Because those uniforms are pretty awesome. That sounds fucked up. I shouldn't be saying that. But Hugo Boss, right? But that's kind of the perfect, actually that's like the perfect metaphor for fascist societies. The propaganda and things like that, they put it up on a pretty display, but then when you go up underneath the poster, you find the graffiti, which is the reality of it, right? It goes back to the thing I said about the women is that they used to say like, "Oh, these silly Germans," but then we see, holy shit, those evil Germans, right? Propaganda, it's really bad. Even now, like propaganda is still so bad. And again, there's a lot of astroturfing with corporations and other things like that. It's pretty crazy. Like as people have pointed out, like there's the Occupy Wall Street movement in like the early 2012s, and then suddenly corporations started adopting certain ideologies, and some people suspect it's to try to get them away from this anti-corporate ideology. Oh yeah, yeah. It's like there's nothing wrong. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with reading it now. There's probably a lot of books that I would like books and stories I would probably avoid because they would just be non-productive. Because there's like a lot of there's of course a lot of modern propaganda and stuff like that. That's nothing more than just douchey ranting, and it's like, well, that's non-conducive, and it has nothing to do with history because it's some random jerk. Like, what's the guy's name? Richard Spencer. Like, I don't know if he's written a book. I have no idea, but I had no interest in reading anything about it. In fact, I didn't even really want to know his name. He shouldn't be famous. They shouldn't be talking about him. They talk about him so much. It's like, stop giving him press. He's a jerk, to say the least. Don't give him press. Don't talk about him. Just like you see with these shooting things. Don't turn these people into celebrities. Don't, talk about the event, talk about the victims, talk about the horror of it. Don't make them into celebrities. Stop it. Don't make them into celebrities. Because even if you make them into bad celebrities, they sometimes they get people that turn them into idols, and let's stop doing that. Because like I said, how many victims, like take Columbine. I was watching a thing about how Dylan Klebold's mom did a TED talk, and it was really bad because all she did was blame other people and other things. Had nothing, she tried to push the blame off of her, which is really, it's like, again, I'm not saying it's necessarily the parents' fault. There's a lot of factors that go into it, but also you do have to admit that there had to be some failure in your regard. But when you're constantly blaming other people, it's like, come on, this is, it's like there's some aspects that he is a victim, definitely, but he also hurt a lot of people, and more than one person is at fault here. She tried to blame on the other kid. Yeah, we know the names of these kids, but how many victims do we actually know the name of, if any? We need to talk about the victims, right? Celebrity. They make celebrities of these people, and it's terrible. Stop talking about them. Talk about the actions. Talk about the victims. Talk about the horror of it and just how absolutely horrible it is. You know, Stop with the celebrity culture crap, right? I don't mind if someone's famous, you know, but at the same time, let's not let people be infamous, okay? Let's not make them famous for bad things unless there's a particular example, like a historical example, right? Because again, you've got some people like some people in the gun tuber community, call it, people that do gun videos on YouTube, that if they do mention shootings, they don't say the name or talk anything about the shooter because because they'll say it like this. They'll say that piece of shit doesn't need fame, doesn't need their 15 minutes in the spotlight because they're a piece of shit. Which again is very judgmental, but it's okay. They did something horrible, right? Let's give it some time before we start to look at it more objectively because mass murder is always horrible, right? And it's just like, yeah, they end up creating that. Um, you end up getting that because what is it? I'll give you a great example. Is well, I mean that happens with just about anybody. That's the thing about social media. You get people that post about how bad somebody is, but what they don't realize is you're giving them free advertising. Like Andrew Tate. Never heard of Andrew Tate before I saw people posting online about how he's the devil, I guess. And I'm like, who? Who the hell is this guy? You know? And then it's like, oh, he's this I'm a mega Chad guy, women, blah blah blah, whatever, right? And I'm like, oh, so he's just some guy, right? He's just some douchebag, right? And then all the thing about the court cases against him and all that kind of stuff, and it's like, why are we talking about who is this guy? What does he do? What what does he contribute to society other than being a big douchebag with lots of money? Nothing. He contributes nothing to society. He's just a big douchebag. That's all he is. He shouldn't be famous. We don't need to be talking about him. We've got people starving to death in the streets. Let's not talk about Andrew Tate. I don't care about that. Let's spend more time talking about the policies of people that are running for office instead of just saying, "Hey, it's this guy with this letter and this guy with this letter." No, let's talk about their actual policies, the history, their legislation history, and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, let's not give this guy attention. Why does he deserve attention? Because what's going to happen is some people, oh yeah, oh thank you so much for dropping by, man. No, it's good because it, like I said, I'm being lazy and not doing the stuff I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm also trying to chill from my week at work, right? Plus, I don't mind streaming for a little bit longer anyway. But thank you for dropping by and talking with me. But I'm going to keep going on this topic though. But what was I saying? Another example is Belle Delphine. Never heard of her until people started posting about how horrible she is on Facebook or whatever. They're like, "Oh, look at her. She's doing this stuff for attention. She's breaking laptops with a hammer." And I was like, "I don't care. I mean, yeah, it's a waste of money. That money could probably be going to like a charity or something like that. But also, who cares?" Oh yeah, and also I hope you have a good weekend, man. And anyone else watching, if they decide to bounce, I hope you guys have a good weekend. Because I'm gonna have a good weekend because I'm gonna have a good week going on my vacation. But yeah, it's like infamy. It goes back to the Michael Jackson thing. Infamy is just as useful as fame, right? So let's not give these people the attention they don't deserve, you know, because Penn and Teller has a great example of this with Norman Borlaug, who is a who was a biologist who engineered who re-engineered wheat to allow India to become more self-sustaining. People were starving to death, and then with this work he put in, he allowed India to become more self-sustaining and become more of a power in the world because they could actually like exist on their own, right? And he's a Nobel Prize winner, and 99.9% of people don't know who he is. You know, this kind of goes into the thing like that I don't like about Greta Thunberg, right? Now, this is not to get into the politics of climate change, man-made climate change, all that kind of stuff, but I don't like the fact that she's the most famous person. Let's put a scientist up there, please. Like someone that can actually, because again, look at Stephen Hawking. He's one of the most famous nuclear physicists. You could take anybody. Uh, I don't know, Alex Jones, maybe. I don't know. You take the craziest person, the craziest media personality you can find, and put him up next to him, and Stephen Hawking would debate him into the ground. Even people that I think are a little bit too attention seeking, like what's his name, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Even he's an astrophysicist. If you sit there and say, "Hey, how does this work?" He'd say, "Let me tell you. I can explain to you how it works." But she's just kind of like a celebrity. That's really it. I mean, an advocate, an organizer, a philanthropist. You could call her all these names, but she's not a scientist. Now, maybe she's going to work on that and she'll eventually become a client scientist, which would be great. Absolutely. But we need to have a client scientist be the famous person that represents the science. Granted, I know there are plenty of people that you'll never, ever, ever be able to convince. Like, period. Well, that's fine. We can't convince everybody. You're not going to be able to get everybody to change their mind. But let's please put somebody in place because when you have stuff like, in fact, recently with the thing with Israel and Hamas, right? She was showing support for Palestine, and then like I think she had like a beanie baby that was like an octopus, and I think there's like a discussion on whether or not she intended that to be what do they call it, a dog whistle for like an anti-Semitic ideology. And it's like maybe I've heard this stuff. I haven't gone too in depth into it because I don't want to give her the attention because she's not a climate scientist. But you see now this thing, and then also with her like going to jail. And then there's all these just stop oil people that are like destroying stuff, destroying private property, and certain kind of protests and stuff like that. It's like it needs to come from a science standpoint. Just like laws about medicine need to come from doctors, not lawyers and politicians. Laws about science need to come from scientists. Um, Laws about the economy need to come from economists, right? Laws about psychology and mental health need to come from psychologists. Not lawyers, not people who spent most of their life living a super wealthy life, like 99% of politicians, and they've just been lawyers their whole lives. The only quality I mean, you see, don't even get me started on some of this insane crap. That's very judgmental, but there's some of the stuff that some of the American politicians say, and you're like, really? And this is the guy or woman, this is the man or woman. Uh, I know that's calling the binary, but I think we don't have that many transgendered politicians too. So individual, how about that? I'm trying to be fair here, but the individual that's saying this is also voting on the laws with this thought in their head, probably. That's what they're saying, so I'm going to go by what they say and assume that is actually how they think. They're voting on these laws. You know, again, this comes up to again, I'm talking about politics and stuff like that, and I try to be real light about it because I don't want to start anything, but I will talk about this. Again, there's a lot of things having to do with medical stuff that people that don't have even a rudimentary understanding of human biology are voting on laws related to science. It's like, no, no, we need to have the scientists. And it's kind of the same thing. I don't hate somebody for being an advocate. Putting in that kind of work is a lot of work, and absolutely, but I don't. It shouldn't be a celebrity thing. It needs shouldn't. That goes back to that judgment. I don't feel it's effective to have a celebrity because when the celebrity makes a mistake, because remember, she and other people similar to her are representative of the entire thing. So when you don't have a scientist but a celebrity, when the celebrity does something, that causes the entire thing to be put into criticism. So now people who previously used whatever arguments or didn't believe in it, now they're going to look at it and they're going to say, well, look, this is the person you put up there, and they're this kind of person. So what does that say about this whole thing? And it's hard to argue because then now you're going to have to come back and try to argue from a science standpoint. But then, like, okay, but if it was really about this, where's the scientist? Who's the scientist? You know, it's you know, and it's like, come on. It goes to all this celebrity culture and influencers. You see that in social media and stuff too. Like again, just like talking about the money, I don't want to be famous. I don't mind having people watch, absolutely, and I like entertaining people and things like that. But I'm not looking to be Markiplier. I'm not looking to be the Game Grumps. I'm not looking to be anything like that. I just like to entertain and do stuff just for funsies. Because again, for me, it's an artistic expression. Like that's why I make memes, even when it's things like the 9/11 meme or whatever, which you can say, oh, well, that's in poor taste. It's like a little bit, yes. And if you think I'm a jerk for it, absolutely, that is your right. And if you don't want to watch my content because you think it's too edgy and it's insensitive, absolutely. I won't disagree with you on that. I wish you could block people on YouTube. So I'd say that absolutely feel free to block me. I won't feel offended at all. I won't say there's anything wrong with you. You have that absolute right. You know, or anything I say, again, someone might say, well, this about what I say about these other things, and they say, well, that's unacceptable, and I'm like, that is absolutely your right. you know and if you want to be effective and talk to me about it, I will listen. I will validate you as much as I can, as long as you can be effective. Now if you want to be insulting, ineffective, or toxic about it, I don't have any interest in listening to it. But if you want to be fair, absolutely tell me how I'm wrong. I will absolutely listen. Sometimes and if I don't even respond, it's not that I'm ignoring you, it's just what you said is perfectly encapsulates what you needed to say, and I can't disrespect that. Because I've done that sometimes when people were fair and reasonable. I would see what they say, and I'd be like, cool. I wouldn't say cool because that sounds kind of sarcastic, but I would be like, awesome. You know, I'll give you that. In fact, sometimes I might say that, hey, I'll give you that, or say, hey, you know what, you make a good point, because people are allowed to disagree. Hell, me and Rose disagree on stuff. That doesn't mean that we're gonna have like problems, but we're allowed to disagree with stuff. I've got friends that disagree with stuff, and we've gotten into it before. And then at one point, I felt like he was being a little personal, and I had to dial it back and said, if I said this and it made you feel like I was being this, then I'm sorry for doing that. You know, because even though I didn't feel like I was being personal, it may have been something that he perceived as personal or he took it that way. And so I said, let me let me be the first one to extend the olive branch and say, hey, I did not intend it this way, and if it was perceived as that way, then I'm sorry. I could have worded it better. I could have said it in a different way or just simply not said it. That's on me because I'm responsible for what I say. Even if you interpret it in a way that's different than my intention, I still have to be mindful of what I say and what I do because that's my responsibility. And so we were able to so he was able to be like, okay, yeah, and then we were able to be okay about it because that's the thing. You're allowed to disagree with people. People are allowed to disagree with you. It's effective. This goes back to talking about effective, to be fair, to be reasonable about it, you know, and to allow people, because again, you see it right now with the stuff that's going on in both with the stuff that's going on in Ukraine and with the stuff that's going on in Israel, is that there are divisions that are being created, and some people have disagreements about certain aspects of it because it's a complicated issue. It's black and there's it's not exactly black and white. You know, Granted, at the same time, there are certain things that I can't get behind whatsoever. Invading sovereign nations, murdering innocents, and other things. Absolutely not. You know, I definitely won't I can't get behind that under any circumstances. I wouldn't feel right about getting behind it. At the same time, there are aspects of it that people can disagree with, and you can be fair to each other about it. You know, because again, a lot of the stuff like talking online, discussing on Reddit, on Facebook, Twitter, all that kind of stuff, it's all just text online, man. No one's going to die because no one's going to die because someone disagreed with you and you want to say how they're wrong. You know, I actually had a guy one time in relation talking about gun politics said, "You guys are the loudest voices, and he said something to the effect of, you need to be corrected." And I was like, need? What do you mean by that? You mean you're compelled to do it? Where is this compulsion coming from? Is it something within you? Is someone telling you to do it? Like, what is it, part of your religion or your personal beliefs that you have to do this? What does this mean? They kind of started waffling and kind of tried to get away from it because I don't know if they either misspoke or if they got in an emotional and they said something. I don't know. They might have misspoke. They might have meant it in a different way, but it's like something like that is really, really strange to me. And it's possible that they may be neurodivergent like I am, that they feel compelled, or it could be their morality or their ideology that they feel compelled to correct people or to fix or to speak out against it, possibly, which again is their right. But it's also like you got to be mindful about how effective that is for you in addition to other people. Because again, there's stuff that really that gets me incensed, and I'm like, "Ah!" But I also have to be effective about it. It's like I mentioned before about how I worked with a guy who was a flat earther, and he was really passionate about it. But I, listen to him. I validate him, but at the same time, I'm like, well, I don't agree with that, but I find what you say very interesting. And you're allowed to believe whatever you want. You're allowed to think I'm wrong because guess what? Maybe I am. I don't think I am, but maybe I am. Hey, look, I've never been up in space. You know, I've never been up in space. So maybe if I go up in space, I might find it's like this big square, right? And I'm like, oops, oopsie daisy, my bad. So, I give him his right, and he gives me my right. And he was willing to talk to me about certain things that he would have major disagreements with another person at work about, because he didn't feel like it was effective for him to talk to this other guy, but he could talk to me about it, and we would be more reasonable, more fair. And it's like, yeah, you got to give them that because there are Christians There are uh, there are Christians, there are Muslims, there are Jewish people, there are Mormons, there's Baptists, there's Methodists, there's Pentecostal, there's so many different religions. There's personal beliefs, there's liberal, conservative, etc., etc. It's beliefs and people in general are an entire spectrum. It goes back to that thing I said about culture, right? People are their own culture. And so let's not pigeonhole each other and let's just try to be fair. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I don't want people to silence me because they disagree with me, because I guarantee you there's things that people disagree with me on, that people would say, wow, I really disagree with you on that. And I'm like, I'm sure you do. Now, if they want to be ineffective and say, well, you this, and I'm like, no, that's not true. I feel this way about it. And because of these reasons, and that's why there's some things that I will just flat out not discuss with people, because it's like, there's no way we can be effective because most people that discuss this can't be effective. So there's no reason to discuss it. And you can, and it goes, some people will try to bait you and say, well, you're a coward. You can't even back up what you say. You can't even prove what you say. You can't even, okay. What I love to do is respond with this. I like to say, okie dokie, artichoke. That's fine because there's nothing I could say that could convince you anyway. Well, anyway, Rose has just gotten home, so well, thank you guys for hanging out and for checking out my stream. I have to see about whether or not I'm going to stream cross stitching stuff again, but I have set up the stuff for Code Veronica, so I'm going to be starting that once I get, at least sometime after I get back, once I'm settled in. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and you have a good one.